Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Soul Chess in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 116, Asano Kigo, the greatest guitar ever. Third-person POV. Kendra came back to the Kurosaka clinic that evening woozy, over Ichigo's shoulder. She had been so frustrated in her mission that she had gone to the local bar to get some alcohol and asked Ichigo to watch over her so she didn't do anything she might regret and to keep her well-standing reputation upheld. As he was underage, Ichigo didn't touch a drop of alcohol, but he had himself a few sodas. It had been 16 days since Ichigo returned to his life and it was like he had never left. He spent his time on the weekends catching up on his missed assignments and the cosplay festival he had actually managed to be a part of. While he didn't dress up, since he hadn't been able to get a costume together, given that the week-long festival started the day after he came back, he still had a lot of fun, the best fun in years, and the first festival with his girlfriend. Yet despite the festivities and the good times, Kendra only became more and more annoyed with each passing day, wondering why her search had turned up so fruitless. She thought she had investigated Karakura Town through every possible mean. Why was Jinjo so hard to find? It was maddening. Ichigo helped the woozy lieutenant over to the family couch. Kendra groaned. "Easy there," he told the dizzy officer, "you should be fine with some rest." "Ugh, thanks," Kendra told him. Rather than shout and aggravate Kendra's throbbing head, Ichigo went and looked for his dad. He found him in the clinic. "Dad, watch Kendra for me, I'm going out." "Where are you going at this hour?" his dad asked. "Hollow Patrol, what else?" Ichigo said, tossing his badge in the air. "I've got nothing to worry about anymore, so I told Rukia and the others I'd make up for lost ground that they covered while I was gone." "Ah, fine then," Ishine, poring over paperwork, tossed Ichigo a bell. "Give that to Kendra, tell her to ring it if she needs anything." "Yeah, see ya." Ichigo had a pretty uneventful Hollow Patrol. In fact, his recent patrols had gotten him used to the unpredictability of his upgraded stamina and strength thanks to his Hollow. Ichigo, using training techniques Lelouch had taught him, was getting better at controlling his power. Without knowing it, with his latest upgrade, he could stand on PAR with an eye-patchless level 5 Kenpeki if Ichigo was using his Bankai and Mask. Speaking of his Bankai, he had yet to see if his Bankai had changed form at all. He hadn't had the reason to. After slaying another Hollow, Ichigo looked at Zanjutsu. As he saw his unwavering brown eyes in the steel of the blade, he renewed his self-oath to only use Bankai if absolutely necessary or if the matter was of a very personal nature. Ichigo had gone into Urahara's basement and whipped out a Getsuga Tensho with his Shikai just for the hell of it. He had never seen anything quite so massive, and that was why he was determined to control his power by going out on so many patrols. Lack of control had nearly cost him his life. Sure, it had helped in the war against Talbumasuk, and it was part of Lelouch's plan to ultimately turn the tide against Muramasa by having Lelouch deceive Muramasa by pretending to deceive the entire Soul Society, and it had helped him get revenge on Kokuto and Shuren, but after last time he would not lose to the weakness of his inability to control his power. If you have a weakness, then you train until you will never lose to that weakness. Kendra had said that to him when the conversation came up during the festival. Ichigo didn't know when the newest threat would show up, and he wanted to be absolutely prepared for it. After an evening of hollow slaying, he went home and switched back into his body, spitting out Khan's pill into his hand. Ichigo didn't know why he bothered to take back the annoying pervert of a mod soul, even though Urahara offered to keep Khan and give Ichigo a less troublesome Jikengan, but as much as he disliked Khan, he didn't know what he might get from Urahara that could just as easily bite him in the ass, especially considering Chappie. There were a few good offers, but they were far outside Ichigo's price range. Urahara had offered Ichigo a prototype Jikengan of his own design by the name of Noba, but the price was 10,000 yen. Ichigo passed it straight up, even if it would solve his problems. Ichigo climbed into bed and had a good night's rest. The next day, it took some painkillers and coffee to work it all out of her system, but Kendra managed to lose her hangover by mid-morning, saying how she was made of sterner stuff than that. She'd gone binge drinking before with Rangiku, and an assassin must build up immunity to just about everything. She was still frustrated about the lack of her completeness with regards to the mission, so she called for an emergency meeting at lunch between her, Rukia and Vera. The three girls sat at a table all by themselves during lunch. With the exception of Ms. Waro, who was on the roof with Ichigo and the others, most of the students avoided Vera, and despite her beauty, most were content with watching Kendra from afar for fear of what she would do up close if they stared for too long. "Girls, we need a change of tactic," Kendra stated promptly. "That much has been obvious for a while," Rukia said as she sipped on her juice box. Kendra gave her dull glare before continuing, "Last night, before I got totally plastered, I came up with a theory. What if we got someone to infiltrate the Fullbringers and pretend to be one of their own, like a mole? They'd never accept Sato, Inu, or Arisawa, they're too closely cemented to Ichigo." According to a report Vera got from Lelich, Jinjo's got a huge spy network. "I like the idea, but they know we're after them. We need something even they won't suspect," Rukia stated. "But then we would need someone who has Ryutsu, but hasn't learned to use it properly yet," Kendra stated. "Do we even know someone like that?" Rukia asked. Vera suddenly stuck her thumb up in the air. "Pray tell, who exactly?" Kendra was intrigued by Vera's knowledge. Vera sipped her milk and then urged the girls to follow her, leading them to the classroom, and then pointed at a specific desk in the room. There was gum on the undersides, the inside was an absolute mess, and a blue shoulder bag hung next to it. "Huh? Whose desk is this?" Rukia asked. Kendra bent down and picked up a piece of scrunched up paper. She uncrinkled it and then folded her hand over her eyes. "You cannot be serious." "What? What is it?" Rukia asked. Kendra, without removing her hand from her eyes, handed Rukia the unfolded paper ball. It was a test with a failing score of a 37 and the name of the test taker at the top. Rukia was utterly shocked and exuded a confused huh when she saw the name. "We can't use him. We absolutely cannot use him. It'll be a disaster," Kendra said studiously. Vera shook her head with a small frown. "What do you mean no?" Rukia asked the silent Soul Reaper. Vera stuck out her chest, striking a brave pose, and pretended to hold up a shield with her arm. "Bravery and loyalty are the last two words I'd use to describe him," Kendra said as she folded her arms. Vera pointed to herself and then winked. "You want us to trust you on this?" Kendra asked. "Did Kojima put this idea in your head?" Vera flushed and tapped her fingers together and smiled awkwardly. Kendra's fingers met her eyelids again. "For the love of all that I hold dear, if this blows up in our faces for obvious reasons, I am totally letting you take all the blame. But how do we get him to agree to even meeting with us?" Rukia asked. Vera looked at Kendra and then batted her eyelashes in a seductive manner as a suggestion. Kendra got the message. She shook her head. "No, no way, I won't reduce myself to that level." "But you know it'll work," Rukia told her. "No, out of the question, I will not play seductress," Kendra refused with scornful eyes. "However, since we both know that he won't refuse me," she glanced behind her, "nor would any of these boys mind you," she looked front again, "I suppose I'll have to do it." She frowned again, "But we take care of it my way." During the middle of class, during a lull in the lecture, Kendra scribbled a note on a blank sheet of paper and carefully folded it into 8 sections. At the end of the day she placed the note in the proper shoe locker and then went off to meet Rukia and Vera at Karakura Central Park. As a test, to make sure that their target was useful, Vera, Rukia and Kendra would all be in their Shiakusho. To make sure the target would recognize them, Rukia would be standing by the fountain before escorting the target into a clearing in the woods where Kendra and Vera would help her explain everything. Rukia waited in broad daylight in her Shiakusho for their target to show up. He finally did and came rushing towards the fountain at top speed, Asano Kigo. "I came here as soon as I got Kendra's letter. I was so happy that you two really need me. What can I do? How can I be useful to the goddess of the school?" Kigo was more excited than a gerbil on caffeine. It was confirmed with him being able to see her, Kigo had spiritual pressure. Rukia turned around and urged him to follow her. "Come with me," she told him. Kigo followed unquestionably. There was not a questionable code of ethics here. Any spiritually aware living being was allowed to be used for covered missions if they were already acquainted with the representative of the world. Given that Kigo was one of Ichigo's friends and the only one unable to defend himself from a hollow, but could be made to do so, Kendra was certain that this could work. This was assuming of course that Kigo would willingly put himself in harm's way and that he didn't botch the whole operation on account of his own blatant stupidity. Kendra was undoubtedly surprised when Kigo was able to identify her without fail. She inquired the boy on the matter. "I never forget a woman's face, and your beautiful green eyes and the shape of them are unmistakable. Also the shade of your hair is exactly the same," Kigo told her, "even if it's not shining." Kendra hid her smirk behind her face mask. Maybe this won't be so bad after all. Kigo then noticed Vera's hand and eye patch. "Whoa. Vera, are you okay?" Vera promptly hid behind Kendra. She doesn't feel comfortable talking about it. It was a traumatic experience that happened long ago, Kendra told Kigo. The young boy scratched his head. Kendra gestured to the ground. "Sit, we have much to tell you. Though it pains me to say this to you of all people, we need your help." One explanation later. "Did you get all of that?" Rukia asked Kigo. "I think so," Kigo said, still trying to make sense of it all. "Wow, that's a much tamer response than Ichigo gave," Rukia responded. "This is so cool." Kigo outburst. "Spoke too soon," Kendra said flatly. So if I help you guys I get to be like a superhero, which you guys sort of are like, and I can finally be in the group. I can really help and be useful? This isn't like some kind of trick." "Yes," Kendra said impatiently, "will you do it?" Kigo held his fist in front of his heart and stuck out his chest proudly. "You can count on me, Otamaka-san. I'll do my best." Well, for enthusiasm at least, Kendra thought to herself. What are we going to do about Fullbring? Does anyone even know how it works? Rukia asked. Vera raised her hand. Using her silent language, which left Kigo confused, so Rukia had to translate. She gave Kigo the lowdown of how she understood how it worked from the things Lelich had told her about it in accordance with the mission. "Do you have such a tool you can use, Asano-san?" Kendra asked him. "I think so." Kigo scratched the back of his head. "I mean, I don't know how much of a connection to it I have, but there's this guitar that hangs in my room." He looked at the girls with a rare serious face. "I won it in a contest when I was young. I've always wanted to learn how to play it and play it well, but my sister annoys me about the horrible sound of it constantly. Pride is what's important though. I think we'll be able to work with it. I'll be right back." Kendra left in a flash and came back in 30 seconds flat with Kigo's guitar, shocking him. "That's incredible," Kigo appraised. Kendra glanced back with pride. "There's a lot you can learn how to do once you master your Ryutsu." She handed the guitar to Kigo. He examined it. "So how is this supposed to work exactly?" he asked. Vera pushed her arms forward. "You gotta push your feelings into the guitar." Kendra translated Vera's actions. "Feel the emotion within you and the memories between you and your guitar. Fuel it with your pride and your latent spiritual power will be unlocked from within it. Put my pride into my guitar." Kigo held the guitar as he was about to play it and tried to envision the memory of when he first got the well-kept thing. Kigo closed his eyes and began to play the guitar. Kendra, given what Kigo had said earlier, expected him to suck, but he actually wasn't bad at all. She didn't know if the soul in the guitar was guiding his fingers or if Kigo's sister was an overcritical bitch. Given how she was barely feeling any pulsations of Ryutsu, she was banking on the latter. Kigo continued to play as he felt the rhythm in his guitar. Rukia and Vera were both enjoying the beat he was playing. Kigo kept his mouth shut as he was playing, which was a bonus. Even Kendra was bobbing her head to the rhythm Kigo had with the instrument. Kigo then struck all of the chords hard and then a burst of energy followed. Radiant, violet, electric energy surged through the guitar and Kendra grabbed Kigo's shoulders to ease the pressure of Kigo, awakening his power. When the lightning surge calmed down, Kigo could see the fruits of his labor. The guitar had transformed from classic to electric and it was, in Kigo's mind, 100% awesome. The guitar was long and amethyst in color. The body was split into two sections, with the section furthest from the ground being the longer. The tips of the guitar body were all pointed and the edges of the outer sections were bladed. The longer section had an inset connecting section that had a rigid blade portion on the inside. Kigo, be careful with that, Kendra urged, seeing the sharp edges only to watch as Kigo stroked the blade section and didn't cut himself in the least, as if the guitar knew he was the one stroking it. Kendra was quite perplexed. It was like Vera had said, full bring rarely made sense. Kigo, intuitively, began jamming again. Electrical energy began to generate within the entire guitar. Kigo then strummed fiercely and a ball of electricity went sailing through the air. Kendra had to dodge so she wasn't hurt. She chopped Kigo on the head. "I said be careful," she chided. Kigo was too swept up into his guitar to care. He was holding it like it was a gold bar and squeezed the neck with enthusiasm, demanding to be unleashed into excitement. "This is," Kigo said, thrusting the guitar high above his head, "the greatest guitar ever." He shouted, effectively naming his full bring. As he held it above his head, the guitar morphed into a scythe, and seeing the pointy thing, Kigo cowardly dropped the weapon on the ground and it reverted back to being a guitar. He picked it up, but it didn't transform back. "This is so amazingly awesome. I have to show this to Ichigo." He began to rush off. "Not so fast," Kendra said, and Kigo stopped in his tracks. "Above all things, you cannot tell Ichigo a word about this. He isn't supposed to know anything, not yet." But Ichigo's my pal, our pal. Why can't he know?" Kigo asked. "Classified information," Rukia told Kigo. "Look, do your part and you'll be able to show off your skills to Ichigo without a problem, but for now you need to do as we tell you." "What do I need to do exactly?" Kigo asked. "You need to find and infiltrate a group going by the name of Skyushin. They are led by a man by the name of Jinjo Kyujo." Kendra showed Kigo his picture. Kigo tried to take it, but Kendra pulled it away. Memorize it. You can't have evidence pointing away from your alleged loyalty." "Right, sorry. I'll do my best," Kigo saluted. "We should get him some formal training from Kisuke at the very least," Rukia told Kendra. "He'll never be able to find any of Jinjo's followers unless they were wearing a t-shirt that says, 'I'm a full bringer,' on it." Kendra did her best not to laugh, but she knew Rukia had a point. "Yes, I agree. Asano-san, come with us." 5 days later. Every day after school over the next 5 days since obtaining his full bring, Urahara trained Kigo not in how to master his full bring. They knew Jinjo would probably do that himself, but instead the basics of spiritual combat like sensing Ryutsu, which Kigo proved to have more initial skill than Ichigo, and also Kigo was taught how to manipulate his own Ryutsu to use some basic punches and kicks to make them more efficient. By the end of the week, with Urahara's help, Kigo was able to shatter rocks the size of shopping bags with his hands and feet. Undoubtedly Jinjo would make him stronger, but that was exactly what Kendra and the others desired. Kigo walked the streets of his hometown, Naraki City, on the lookout for anything suspicious. Kendra had given him a confidence boost Friday before she dropped him off at Urahara's after she knew that Kigo didn't live in Karakura town. She thought that Kigo should wander the streets of his own neighborhood first and see if he could pick out any really weak Ryutsus for practice. Many people were born with Ryutsu without knowing it, but not all of them carried as much of an inert amount that was required to let them see spirits. True, only 1 or 2% of any given population, usually, had Ryutsu, but Japan seemed to be abundant with people like that. Kigo walked the streets in a sandy brown long-sleeved shirt, long blue jacket, jeans, and some black hard rubber boots. For mid-November the sun was unusually strong, so Kigo was also wearing some thick dark sunglasses. He was also carrying his guitar in a guitar case on his back. Kigo kept his eyes peeled, looking left and right. However, he should have been looking straight, for as he approached a corner someone came sprinting down the streets and crashed right into him, knocking them both over. Kigo fell over on his back. The person he had collided with fell on his stomach on their stomach. "Hey! Watch where you are going!" the person he bumped into shouted. Kigo, on instinct, squeezed his eyes shut to apologize and appease the anger. "I'm sorry. I wasn't watching where I was going." "Well, as long as you know it was your fault," Kigo felt the girl who had fallen on him get up from off of him. As she began to dust herself off, Kigo, despite the weight on his back, managed to get up. He then saw the girl that was dusting herself off. She was wearing a dark dress with white fabric covering her breasts. She had magenta hair styled in pigtails with eyes to match, not that Kigo could tell that with her eyes closed as she was wiping the dust off her dress. She had a pair of thigh-length boots and a white hat completed her appearance. "I'm terribly sorry," Kigo apologized and stuck out his hand hoping she'd shake it and he could put this whole incident behind him and move on. "I'm Kigo, Asano Kigo." The girl didn't bother shaking his hand and just put hers on her hips. "Tokugamin Ririka," she said, facing towards the light, waiting for the cross sign, tapping her foot impatiently. Kigo couldn't cross the street in either direction. He didn't want to go the way the girl had just come running from. Though he had the power to fight, that was not for everyday battles. In a fight that Ichigo would have to bail his ass out of, Kigo had as much courage as a mouse. "Why were you running?" Kigo asked, figuring he'd head in the same direction as the girl he was standing at the crosswalk with. She simply huffed, not answering him. Kigo sighed, figuring he'd head in the other direction. He knew how things got with fussy women, humongous problems. However, as he stood there, sighing, eyes closed, he picked up some Ryotsu and it was stronger than his own level. It was coming from the girl next to him. What did Kendra say to do in this situation? If you come across anyone with Ryotsu more powerful than your own, they can only be one of Jinjo's gang. However, do not reveal that you know too much, be discreet. If anything, simply mention Fullbring or spiritual sight on its own. Right, yeah, that was it. Kigo said and looked towards Ririka. Hey, Ririka. What? The magenta-haired girl snapped. Have you ever seen things that most others can't, weird monsters and the like? Kigo asked. Ririka's response was not what he expected. She grabbed Kigo by the back of the throat, put pressure on his diaphragm with 2 fingers and covered his Adam's apple with the other. She got right in his face, scowling fiercely and speaking softly, but cruelly. Who are you? Who do you work for? How much do you know? I don't know anything. The guitar in my case just started acting weird. It's my prized possession, but it's never started transforming and I've started seeing strange monsters and people in black cloaks since last year. Kigo clasped his hands together in prayer. Please don't hurt me, I just want help. Ririka's eyebrow twitched as she sneered at Kigo. You are so meek. The Skyushin wouldn't want anything with you. She turned around, stuck her nose in the air. You're better off just dying. Remember, Asano-san, you need to make it seem like you've been thrown out of society. Use a sob story. You're good at drama. Kigo had practiced his woe is me tale as it were, so he was prepared to beg for help with it. Please don't abandon me. He dropped to his knees. Ever since my parents found out about my guitar and my strange power, they threw me out of the house. I've been wearing the same pair of clothes with only my school uniform as an alternate and using my part-time job to pay money at public laundromats to keep them clean. I have nowhere to go. I sleep in an abandoned warehouse in the next town over. He gripped Ririka's socks, and I just want help. He whined. Ririka kicked him in the face. You are so annoying. She shattered the frames to Kigo's sunglasses. Honestly. Without the dark lenses obstructing his vision, Kigo finally got a good look at Ririka. Despite her bitchy attitude and harsh exterior, seeing her stand there, arms folded, to Kigo she looked absolutely beautiful. He sprung to his feet and was about to say something to compliment Ririka's appearance when the sound of a book snapping shut and the voice of an older gentleman behind him alerted both him and the magenta-haired girl in front of him. Ririka-chan, making boys cry again, are you? Kigo turned to see a man wearing a white button-down shirt with shoulder-length wavy black hair and scar running vertically along the side of his left eye. He was carrying a book in his hand with a bookmark embedded into it. The book was titled, Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Tsukishima. Ririka was surprised to see him, but her surprise was not antagonistic, more like agitation at being seen with a dumbass like Kigo. The boy seems troubled, Tsukishima said with a smile, besides if we just threw him to the dogs Jinjo will get mad at us. Kigo lit up at hearing Jinjo's name. Internally he became laser-focused, but kept his goofy, troubled expression affixed to his face. He knew those poker lessons would come in handy someday. Bingo. He dropped to his knees in front of Tsukishima. Please, you gotta help me. He held his hands up clasped together and then spread them apart, looking at Tsukishima like a sad puppy. This Jinjo guy can help me, right? Of course, Tsukishima smiled. Come with us. What's your name, kid? Asano, Kigo. Kigo got to his feet. I see. Tsukishima put his book under his arm. Well, that's Ririka-chan there, whom you seem to have already met, and I'm Tsukishima Shukuro. I'm sure we'll get along just fine. He smiled at Kigo. Tsukishima's house. Kigo marveled at the luxuriousness of the Tsukushin's home sweet home. Whoa, this place is huge. It's been with my family for 5 generations, Tsukishima told Kigo, which was a lie, not that Kigo could have known that. Ririka-chan, why don't you wait here with our guest and I'll go fetch Jinjo and the others to assemble and we can all meet up in the den. Fine, go. Ririka folded her arms in annoyance. Tsukishima walked off. As Kigo waited with Ririka in almost total silence, he swallowed and built up the courage to speak. I've been meaning to say something since we started walking together. You're really pretty, Ririka. Huh? Ririka exasperated. Are you hitting on me? What? And no, I was just complimenting you. And not that one thing can't lead to the other. Kigo rubbed his hand behind his head. But you know, I figured since I might be staying here that I should tell you what I think of you. Though I'm sure you get lots of compliments on your appearance. Ririka mumbled incoherently to herself and to her shoulder, but she was thinking what she was mumbling. You're the first. Sorry, I didn't catch that. Baka. If I wanted you to hear what I had to say, I would have said it louder, Ririka snapped. Right, sorry, Kigo apologized. You're really annoying, you know that. Ririka stared at Kigo peeved, hands on hips. I hope Jinjo throws you out back onto the streets. At least Shishigure has a pretty nifty ability. What's your special power, running away? No. My full bring is awesome. You'll see. Humph, Ririka turned her head. Asano-kun. Ririka-chan, Tsukishima called for both of them. Kigo and Ririka walked into the den. A tall dark-skinned woman with black hair was standing to Kigo and Ririka's left by the window. To her left and moving clockwise, sitting in the chair, leaning forward with a scowl on his face, was a kid with a partly shaved head and a mohawk. To the kid's left, standing next to the couch even further to the left, was a man with an eyeband over his right eye dressed as a butler. Sitting on the couch to that man's left was a man with black hair, a leather jacket, a white t-shirt and a cross-shaped necklace. To that man's left, on the other side of the couch, was a small boy completely wrapped up in his Game Boy Advance. Standing by the entrance to the den to the right of the blonde boy, was Tsukishima. The black-haired man began to introduce Kigo to the other full-bringers. Across from me is Jackie, he gestured to the woman, that's Shishigure-kun, he gestured to the punk, Gerksho, the butler, Yukio, the blonde kid, and then he gestured to the man on the couch, and, of course, our leader, Jinjo Kyujo. No wonder Otamaki-san couldn't find Jinjo, he's living in Naraki, stalking Karakura town from afar. Kigo realized. Tsukishima tells me you have full bring, Jinjo spoke. What's your story? Kigo repeated the same sob story he gave to Ririka, which Tsukishima overheard, only in greater detail. Kigo's emotion had the full bringers completely unaware that most of what he was saying was an exaggeration. His sister was a complete and utter bitch, and Kigo sure felt like he was the unfavorite of the house. He didn't mention Ichigo or any of his other friends. If Jinjo already knew who he was, since Kendra had mentioned Jinjo's spy network, they might suspect he knew about what was going on. If he pretended to be completely in the dark, they might still believe that he had no idea about the invisible world and had discovered things completely of his own accord. What do you want to do with him? Kiriko asked Jinjo. I say we kick him out, Ririka grumped. That's what you said about Shishigure as well, he turned out to be a ready recruit, Yukio said, continuing to play his game. Quiet, Yukio, you little worm. Ririka raged. Tsukishima put a restraining hand on her shoulder. Kigo, Jinjo called the boy by his given name, what you have is a rare gift. You have the ability to defend yourself from the monsters you see. Not everyone does. It's a curse, Jackie spat. It depends on how you look at it, Jinjo stated. You're lucky. With the exception of Shishigure here, most of us had to sacrifice something to get our full brings. So what exactly do we do with our special powers? Kigo asked. A story for another time, Jinjo stated. I don't trust you with that knowledge quite yet. Jinjo rose to his feet. However, if you can show us your full bring you can stay here. Ha! Ryrika voiced her disapproval. Alright, Kigo said and whipped out his guitar before strumming all the chords at once. Greatest guitar ever. The guitar transformed into its amethyst color and unique design. What can it do? Jinjo asked. Well, I'm sure it can do more, Kigo said, but for now, Kigo began to get into a rhythm and began to play the notes to a rhythm in his head. Ryrika was amazed at how good of a guitar player he actually was. Shishigawara even liked the beat. Jackie smiled, finding it impressive at Kigo's massive guitar shredding skills. If Kendra could see this she'd think it official. Mizuho was either tone deaf or just a complete bitch. Jinjo saw the lightning being generated in Kigo's full bring and then Kigo strummed hard once across all the chords and Kigo unleashed a ball of lightning. Shishigawara ran out in front of the attack. Jackpot knuckle. With his fist he punched the electric energy blast and burst it to pieces. If you were going to do that we could have gone outside, Jinjo smirked at Kigo. Sorry, Kigo said, holding the guitar with one hand and rubbing his neck with the other, I just got so caught up in the moment, you know. Yeah, I hear you. Well, you're welcome to stay, Jinjo told him. Thanks Jinjo, Kigo smiled. Oh man, Otamaka-san is going to be so proud of me. Kigo was given an available guest bedroom as there were several of them and had an exquisite dinner with the other full-bringers. Tsukishima did the cooking. Kigo hadn't eaten anything so delicious in so long. The cafeteria food was fatty and at home he kept to ramen since his parents hardly ever cooked. Isn't Tsukishima-san's cooking amazing? He asked Kigo. He was being friendly for someone who seemed like a punk. You're talking to me? Kigo pointed to himself. Of course, you're technically one of us now, Shishigawara told him, besides anyone who can jam like that is okay in my book. He bit into the string beans he was holding with his chopsticks. Kigo finished eating his meal, but after that comment he felt like, he didn't know what he felt like. These people were treating him like friends, starting to at least. He wondered if he would fail the mission, get too close and then be unable to go through with the whole thing. He shook such thoughts from his head. No, Kendra was counting on him. He couldn't abandon the mission. There were plenty of spare clothes for Kigo to give himself a whole extra wardrobe. As he lay in bed with the lights off in his room, texting Kendra of successful infiltration, he heard an argument out in the hallway. You can't keep running away, Ryrika, he heard Jackie shouting at her, we have to stick together. What do you hope to accomplish by always leaving? I hate this place, Ryrika pouted, sticking her nose in the air, this whole team is lame and that dweeb Jinjo just admitted makes it even lamer. Oh really, Jackie could tell Ryrika was bullshitting her on that last part, I saw that look on your face. You liked Kigo's music just as much as the rest of us did. That is not true, Ryrika was aghast and defensive, it was the most horribly ear-splitting thing I ever heard. Kigo was eavesdropping, looking through the peephole to his bedroom door. He could tell from Ryrika's expression and her voice that she was lying. He did his best not to laugh to himself. You know that we all really care about you? Why can't you be a team player? Jackie scolded her. I don't want anything to do with you guys anymore. I just want to find my own life to live. It's not fair that we have to stay cooped up in this place all the time. I want to go out and have fun, Ryrika complained. Those days are over, Jackie told her. Aizen was defeated unexpectedly and a Tremere Talbumasuk, who took his place, didn't drive Kurosaki Ichigo into a corner, which is what Jinjo needed to make his move. What do they want with Ichigo? Kendra hadn't told Kigo any details. She had only told him that Jinjo was watching Karakura Town carefully and that he shouldn't mention his true roots, including friends, to the Fullbringers if he met them. Well, it sucks. Ryrika shouted. Complaining about it won't do any good. Jackie said and began to walk away. I'm going to get ready for bed. You should do the same. Ryrika stood in the hallway, growing increasingly frustrated. Kigo pushed open his door. Hey, Ryrika. What? What the hell? Were you eavesdropping? Ryrika grouched. Kind of, Kigo shied away. Yes or no? Ryrika growled. Yes, I'm sorry, please don't hurt me. Kigo cowered. Gah. You're so annoying. Ryrika folded her arms and turned away from him. Kigo swallowed, sorry you got in trouble because of me. Baka. Ryrika huffed, hands on hips, I got in trouble of my own accord, you didn't have anything to do with it. Oh, well good then. I'm glad you liked my music. Kigo said, followed by nervous laughter. Ryrika twitched, turned around and continued to bitch at Kigo, weren't you listening? I said it was horrible and ear-splitting. She said it with a blush on her face. I can tell when girls are lying, especially that bad, Kigo said with a straight face. Baka. Ryrika shrieked. Don't get the wrong idea, she pointed at him, Jay, just because I like your music doesn't mean that I like you or that I trust you or anything. Why would I like a dweeb like you anyway? Well, at least it's not physical abuse, Kigo smirked slightly. Gah. What is with that smirk? You are so annoying. I am going to bed. Ryrika stomped off. She's so cute when she's angry, Kigo said. The poor boy seemed to have been bitten by the love bug, staring at the girl that carried it to him. Kigo then closed the door to his bedroom, went inside, changed into some pajamas, sent the text message to Kendra on his job well done and fell asleep. End of chapter 116. Chapter 117, Jinjo Kyujo, Reason for the Revenge. 2 days later. Kendra was in So-iPhone's office, the schoolteacher tapping her foot waiting for an explanation. Kigo had not been seen since Saturday by anyone. His parents were worried about him, and despite Mizuho's denial, she had been in the nurse's office all day with blackened eyes. The suspicion was that it was from having stayed out all night the night before looking for him. So-iPhone knew something was up, and she knew Kendra was responsible, having squeezed it out of Urahara that she'd been hanging around him, but rather than tell her, he passed the buck to Kendra to deliver the message. Despite the fact that Kigo had to be one of her dumbest students, she still cared for every last student in her class. Kendra had never seen such an evil eye sent her way from the former commander of the executive militia. Kendra, there's only one way you're getting out of this office, So-iPhone said with a glare. Kendra proceeded to explain to So-iPhone her reasons, what she had Kigo doing and why she hadn't said anything, the latter of which amounted to not believing So-iPhone would care in the least if one of her worst students had gone missing, and that she didn't want Ichigo finding out about it since there were strict orders that he not know. Whether or not I care, I'm the first person you should come to speak to, So-iPhone responded. The Asano family is very close to filing a missing persons report. Your whole mission will get screwed up if we don't intervene and make something up. I could have been your cover, Kendra. You should have come to me, right away. Yes ma'am, Kendra apologized, sorry ma'am. I didn't think things through ma'am. Despite having the military rank ahead of her, though lower if So-iPhone still had her position given that hers was more important. In the current situation, Kendra was just a student and So-iPhone a schoolteacher, ergo she commanded more respect. So-iPhone's death glare subsided, but she still looked pretty serious. That's settled then. I'll keep Kigo's family at bay and you keep doing what you're doing. Yes ma'am, Kendra saluted. However, So-iPhone said and raised her ryotsu a bit so that it was noticeable to the lieutenant, if Asano-san winds up dead in some form, it'll be your head. She snapped. Kendra swallowed, but saluted nonetheless. Understood. Very good then, run along and get some lunch. 12 days later. Inside Yukio's Fullbring. 97, 98, 99, 100, Kigo counted as he did sit-ups. Jinjo and the others had been working him hard to get in proper shape. Kigo wasn't in magnificent shape as like say, Ichigo, but he'd been built up pretty well. It was all so he could move while using his Fullbring, since he needed the upper body strength to increase the speed of his playing and wield the different forms of his guitar. Kigo was already fast on his feet, but his stamina needed improving to keep playing for long periods of time, since the longer he played a single rhythm the more the guitar took out of him. The Fullbringers had spent the last 2 weeks taking turns training him. Today was Jinjo's turn again. They had been using Yukio's Fullbring to increase the amount of training time for Kigo to squeeze in, and because it was too cold to do so outside with the winter weather settling in. Not bad, that was 14 sets, Jinjo complimented Kigo as the so-called coward got to his feet. Pick up your guitar, show me some moves. Right, Kigo said and picked up his guitar, greatest guitar ever. Kigo said and instantly broke out into one of his favorite rhythms. It was from his favorite racing game. As Kigo jammed electricity generated in his guitar. He then unleashed the ball at Jinjo, who swatted it away with cross of scaffold. Kigo may have gotten better, but Jinjo was still stronger. Kigo switched rhythms to something more 90s rock, bright and neon cultured. It only took him a few seconds before he was able to convert the guitar to its awesome scythe mode. Gimme a target, Kigo requested. Yukio, Jinjo called to the World Maker. Yukio created a few hollows. With his guitar scythe, Kigo cut them all down. Nice work, what else you got? Jinjo asked. Kigo reverted the weapon back to guitar mode. Kigo's rhythm was slower than the last one, and now he was breaking out to Britannia's famous classic rock straight gay band, but that didn't detract them from being awesome. As Kigo strummed to the beat, the area around him began to be distorted. Space was bending completely to Kigo's will. As if that wasn't enough, a small microphone grew out of the guitar. I discovered a new effect to my full bring. Singing the lyrics boosts the effects. Check it out. Kigo spoke to Jinjo as he continued to play without fail. It ain't much I'm asking if you want the truth. Here's to the future. Hear the cry of youth. I want it all. I want it all. I want it all. And I want it now. I want it all. I want it all. I want it all. And I want it now. Jinjo was able to see it with his own eyes. Kigo's voice wasn't as good as his guitar playing, but it wasn't like the sound of a buzzard screeching either. Jinjo noticed that, with the voice amplification, that the area Kigo was distorting was much larger, and it was slowly seeping towards Jinjo's location. Kigo stopped playing, but the distortion continued. Kigo explained his abilities to Jinjo. I can hold the distortion for up to 5 minutes after I stop playing. It gives me time to pick a new song. I can control anything within the distorted space, and, if I pick a faster song, the distortion increases in area quicker. When I play slow, my waves become bigger, but move slower, but when I play fast, they spread out to cover a larger area, but not as much height. Check it out. Kigo moved into another song from one of his favorite video games. Jinjo noticed the change in the distortion waves as Kigo began to take control of the blank area around him, only to notice as Kigo ripped the tiles up from the ground and chucked them at Jinjo. Neat, huh? Kigo asked Jinjo, blocked. Jinjo rushed into Kigo's field to see if his Ryutsu could overpower Kigo's distortion waves. He seemed fine at first, but then noticed as Kigo snapped a few bones in Jinjo's shoulders. This space is a very dense pool of my own Ryutsu, Kigo said, jamming. I can do anything within this space. Now watch the difference when I add the lyrics. Kigo played a few bars of instrumental, leaving Jinjo, with his broken bones, completely caught within Kigo's full bring. Live and learn. Hanging on the edge of tomorrow. Live and learn from the words of yesterday. Live and learn. If you beg or if you borrow, live and learn. You may never find your way. Jinjo noticed the sonic amplifications of Kigo's jamming, and with the power mad shredding of Kigo's full bring, the kid managed to disintegrate Jinjo's cross of scaffold's blade, surprising Jinjo. Kigo, of course, stopped playing and then, before he called back the entire distortion waves, repaired Jinjo's full bring and healed his injuries just like that. That's incredible, Jinjo stated as he and Kigo returned their full brings to their original state. I can manipulate the form of anything that steps within the boundaries of my distortion waves, Kigo explained. I can tear them apart, force them together, whatever, but it's hard getting a wide area of effect, and I have to be able to concentrate. I'm no good against swift attacks. It's not instantaneous. I have to consciously make the effort. Jinjo pat him on the shoulder. Well, we all have our strengths and weaknesses, kid. Jinjo told him and looked up. Yukio. Hi, the blonde kid responded. Kigo and Jinjo were teleported out of Yukio's video game. Go get a shower, Kigo, and take a rest, Jinjo told him. Your full bring is nearly complete. It's coming along swimmingly. Thanks, Jinjo, Kigo said, happy to be given some praise. While washing up, Kigo thought about everything that had occurred in the past 3 weeks, starting with Kendra asking him to do this. Right now she was asking him to gain their trust and complete his full bring since, when they finally executed the ambush, Kigo would be that much more effective and Kigo saw just how effective he could be. The problem was that Kigo was having doubts. The Skyushin had been good to him. All of them treated him like one of their own, even Ririka was starting to come around. Sure, she still bitched at him all the time, but Kigo could see that she didn't flat out despise him as she claimed. Jackie had said that Kigo was like an irresponsible little brother to her, he makes a mess and she gets stuck cleaning it up. It was a joke and is all in good sport. And in fact Kigo looked up to the older woman at times. She had life experience Kigo himself often wondered about himself. Their training sessions often ended up with Kigo getting his butt kicked, but that's because the kid had no sense of strategy and, as he had mentioned earlier, Jackie had speed and distance. Kiriko treated him more like a son. He was a much better father figure than Kigo's biological father even. Kigo's parents were hardly ever home. They worked long hours and Mizuho was almost always in charge for as long as the kid could remember. She was like an evil babysitter. All she was missing was a lightning flash whenever anyone said her name. Kiriko was teaching Kigo to think on his feet since time tells no lies often put Kigo in tight situations, though for training purposes Kiriko always explained the conditions beforehand. Shishigawara treated Kigo like his best bud. The two were constantly competing against each other on the game station in the TV room and their combat sessions together were usually a little more sporting with Kigo usually learning a few judo or karate techniques as well as a few cheap shots. It was things Shishigawara had picked up being a former member of the nicknamed Yakuza minor leagues. Yukio was indifferent about Kigo, finding his over-the-top peppy attitude quite annoying at times, but he'd come to accept Kigo as one of the group. Yukio never took Kigo on in person since Invaders Must Die was always used as the training ground. However, Yukio often used an avatar of himself and created environments to push Kigo, and sometimes give him hopeless situations just to screw with him, which Kigo often called him out on. Training with Tsukishima was very similar to training with Jinjo. Tsukishima always kept his full bring on the death blow type except when he cut a piece of the arena to make things interesting, similar to how Kiriko would set conditions. On a personal level, much like Jackie, Kigo looked up to Tsukishima. He was a pretty cool guy to hang around with on downtime. The Fullbringers hardly ever left the mansion unless it was to buy food and supplies and anyone who did had to wear specific articles of clothing to keep their identities safe. They could not risk discovery by Soul Reapers. Ririka never clashed with Kigo. If she was his training partner, she was blowing a whistle and demanding things out of him like a drill sergeant all the while munching on donuts. Kigo had no idea where his relationship with Ririka stood. She was the only one of the Fullbringers not honest about her feelings so it gave Kigo mixed signals. He'd tried being straight with her, but he'd get weak in the knees since he was hoping for more between them than he always thought there might be. True, Ririka didn't mind his company, but Kigo was afraid she didn't see him as anything as more than a good friend. In reality Ririka simply wasn't sure. Kigo wasn't a wow in the looks department like she desired from her chosen mate, but Kigo was a pretty nice guy and he played a pretty mean guitar. It confused and frustrated her and she couldn't come up with a straight answer about her feelings. She wished she knew the truth. As far as Jinjo was concerned, the man, due to the fact that he was a former substitute Soul Reaper, had lived a longer life than any of the other Fullbringers. Kigo wanted to ask so many questions for Ichigo's sake, but he knew he had to keep quiet about things so that his cover wasn't blown. However, probing for information couldn't hurt. It all depended on what kind of information he probed for. Kigo believed that if he wanted to clear his doubts he'd have to know more about Jinjo. Jinjo figured that if the Soul Society wanted to eliminate Jinjo that there had to be a good reason for it. Jinjo said that he was betrayed so he betrayed the Soul Society right back, but had not given Kigo any details. Kigo hadn't brought up the topic in 5 days. He figured that, since he was on Jinjo's good side for the day, he might ask again. It wasn't that Jinjo didn't trust him with the information, but Jinjo seemed to be bitter about the whole thing. If Kigo could catch the Skyushin leader in a good mood he might be able to get some valuable data. After showering and changing into something comfortable, white sweatshirt and beige carpenter pants, Kigo went to go locate Jinjo. He found the man lounging on the living room couch looking out the window. Jinjo picked up on Kigo's presence. "Oh, Kigo. What's up?" "Jinjo," Kigo said, taking a seat in the nearby recliner, "I was wondering, why you stopped being a Soul Reaper? What made you quit?" Jinjo took a deep breath and then began to explain. "The first thing you need to know is that you can't quit being a Soul Reaper. I still have all of my powers, but I don't use them anymore, but I will the day I set my plan into motion." "Then why the full bring?" Kigo asked. "To throw off the enemy and find another means of gaining power, of course. I, originally, intended to give my full bring powers to the Soul Reaper who gave me my Soul Reaper powers." "Really? Why?" "Because she was powerless. I had taken all of her power and she had been reduced to being just a normal human as a result. I wanted to help her, I loved her," Jinjo stated. Kigo made himself comfortable. "Sounds like a long story, mind telling me?" "You sure you wanna hear this? This isn't a happy fairy tale, you know." "I want to know," Kigo said with a straight face. Jinjo let out a deflated breath. "All right," he took a deep breath. It all started 33 years ago, summer. Naraki City. Jinjo Kyujo, age 20, a student at Karakura University in the next town over, majoring in criminal justice, was walking home from college. He was a good-natured adolescent, always helping folks in need and volunteering at the police and fire department to take care of the low-danger jobs like rescuing cats from trees, finding missing children and stopping the average non-too-bright unarmed purse snatcher. Jinjo was promised a job with the NPA in Tokyo upon graduation. Jinjo's desire to do justice stemmed from his father. Jinjo's father was an officer and passed away when Jinjo was 7. He did everything he could to make his mother proud of him. He always wore a silver necklace that belonged to his father. In his dad's will, which had been written after he was born because his father knew that an NPA officer's line of work was dangerous, he told Jinjo that he wanted him to have that necklace because it had led him to his mother and he thought it might lead Jinjo to his special someone, though Jinjo had only been wearing it when his mother finally gave it to him at 16 when he was old enough to understand its sentimental value. Jinjo was an only child and lived in a small apartment west of the university. It was all he and his mother could afford. Jinjo was going to college on scholarships. He had graduated as the 17th highest scoring student in his class, belonged to the judo and kendo clubs and even had worked a part-time job. Jinjo's mother had always been sickly. She told him that something had happened to him when she was 5 months along with him, but she had no idea as to what. She just remembered being attacked completely randomly only to wake up in the hospital inexplicably 5 hours later. Other than his pre-birth incident, Jinjo had lived a rather normal life. However, normal was relative. Jinjo had had the ability to see ghosts for as long as he could remember. However, it had never bothered him and he chose mostly to see it as a bonus. It was just more people he could help. Of course he had an obligation more to the living, more so than he had one to the deceased. Jinjo thought he had seen spirits of all shapes and sizes, but as he walked the long, scenic bike path that was on a high altitude on the western edge of Karakura town so he could head back home for summer break and see his mother's smiling face when he told her how well he was doing. He stopped as he reached the top of the hill to catch his breath. The walk from the university to home was very long and changed in altitude frequently. As he stood at the top of the path he looked over the semicircular bushes over the horizon. He admired the view. He looked at his watch. It was 2 in the afternoon. Since the part of the path he was near was close to a shrine, he decided to take a rest and have some water from the water bottle he always kept in his bag. It was here that Jinjo made his pivotal decision, for had he kept going he would have gone home and the Soul Society simply would have been down an officer, but he didn't, they didn't, and 33 years later he'd be telling Kigo about what happened. "Sure is a nice view," Jinjo said as he let his heart rate go down whilst he sat on the bench. He was there for a good 3 minutes and was just about to leave when a loud roar rang in through his ears. Jinjo turned around and performed a few backflips as he was almost crushed by a creature with gigantic hands. The creature had a triceratops-shaped, white head, arms that wouldn't look unusual on a gorilla given the proportions, and the body and shell of a turtle. It had yellow eyes and no teeth. It was twice Jinjo's size. With its massive hand it had crushed the bench Jinjo had just been sitting on moments ago. Unzipping his backpack, Jinjo whipped out his Shina and aimed it at the creature. Since he wasn't allowed to carry a gun or something like that without a permit and didn't have the money to purchase one, Jinjo relied on his trusty Shina he'd had since high school to get the job done. Jinjo ran forward towards the gigantic creature. He'd seen freaks of nature like this fly above his head before during his teen years, though they were usually destroyed by people in black clothing. Jinjo however knew that these things obviously were interested in him right now, so he had to defend himself. If only he knew what he was getting himself into. Jinjo charged and sidestepped the lumbering creature, and then with his sword he took a swing at the creature's stationary arm. I bet this hurts. Kota. Thwack. The hard bamboo struck the massive creature in the arm, but it did little more than have thudding impact. Jinjo stared at the creature as it stared back. Jinjo gaped. That wasn't supposed to happen. The creature roared in his face, and Jinjo knew that his best option was now to run. However, the creature was fast enough to keep up with him despite its bigger size, and Jinjo did not have the energy to keep up his downward sprint indefinitely. As he spiraled around the hillside, the creature pounced on him, but suddenly a young woman went flying over his head and cut off two of the creature's large fingers. She had short, bob-cut, lilac hair and brown eyes. She was wearing a black uniform, much like one Jinjo had seen before, and she was wielding a real sword. The young woman looked to be Jinjo's age, give or take 1 or 2 years. She had seen Jinjo running, and that obviously meant he could see her and the creature. "Stay back, civilian," she shouted, "I have this." She leapt into the air and used Shunpo as the creature tried to take a swing at her. She got behind it and went for the neck, but the creature shot its tail at her as if it was made of elastic and, with the spiky points on it, impaled her through the stomach with its attack and then threw her behind it and made for Jinjo. Jinjo knew the logical thing was to run, but he'd never abandoned a person in need before in his life. He'd never be able to face his father after his death if he abandoned someone so readily. Jinjo's father was immediately avenged by the officers at his side. Despite not knowing anything about this woman, Jinjo knew that these people in black protected him and the civilians from these creatures. He believed it was high time a human returned the favor. Jinjo readied his Shina again. He ran towards the monster as it tried to crush him. The college student jumped away and to the side and then took a leaping bound over his favorite patch of concrete, the same path he'd walked so many times during his college years, and managed to get to a higher bounce than he was used to and used it to propel him right on top of the creature's face in front of its eye. He then leapt over the creature's head and slid down its back. The tail came at Jinjo lightning quick, but his cop-in-training reflexes, but he dodged to the side and whacked the back of the tail with his Shina as he passed towards the ground for kicks. He rushed to the woman's side. Her wound was bad and she was scuffed up from being thrown to the ground, but she seemed to be okay. "Hey. Hey. Miss." Jinjo shook her by the shoulder. The Soul Reaper roused as she looked up to see Jinjo and the hollow behind him turning to face them both. "Get out of here," she told him. "I jumped over that monster to get to you." "We'll escape together," Jinjo told her. "I've got one foot in the grave and I'm already dead. You're a living being and you don't even know me. What kind of naive idealism do you hold?" The woman snapped at him. "It's not idealism. Your kind, whatever you are, has protected my kind from those things." "I thought I should return the favor," Jinjo said, and helped the woman up onto his back above his backpack. "You'll never be able to get around it a second time," the woman said weakly. "Watch me," Jinjo told her. He handed her his Shina. "Here, hold this, I'll need both hands to support your weight." "I've got a better idea," the woman said. "And that is?" Jinjo asked. "The probability of us getting out of here is low. Even if you were to get around that hollow, you'd never escape its reach, and I'm already a goner as it is." "Are you strong?" she asked Jinjo. "Ahem," Jinjo cleared his throat. "Right, stupid question," the woman said, and let go of Jinjo and fell onto the ground. "Hey." Jinjo turned around only for the woman to stick her sword in his face. "This is my Zanpakuto. I don't want to die and you want to live and save us both. Take my Zanpakuto and thrust it into your chest. If we're lucky, my power will transfer to yours and you'll become a substitute Soul Reaper. You'll have the power to fight and beat that thing. And if we're not lucky, well, we're both dead anyway," the woman said. "I'll do it, give me that Zanpakuto," Jinjo stated. What's your name and what are you? I'm a Soul Reaper. My name is Taka Natsumai. And I'm a college student. My name is Jinjo Kyujo. Jinjo took Natsumai's Zanpakuto and thrust it into himself. There was a surge of power. The hollow backed off from advancing and Jinjo appeared holding a Zanpakuto in his hand. It was bigger than the average katana, so it was more like a nodachi. As the surge died away, the hollow brought its arm down upon Jinjo. He sliced its fingers off with the same swing. Angry, the hollow lurched its head forward and tried to bite Jinjo. With a smirk, Jinjo whacked it over the head with his sword and split it in half, and that was the end of that. Present day. After the hollow attack, I think I passed out for a bit from all the excitement. When I came to, I was home. I thought everything that had happened had just been a dream. However, when I pushed open the door to my bedroom, Natsumai was talking to my mother, pretending to be my girlfriend that I hadn't had a chance to tell her about. Jinjo laughed. That was chaotic. I remember my mother saying how I pick girls well when I hardly knew Natsumai at all. Natsumai and I became good friends over the next month. She explained to me how I'd accidentally taken all of her power instead of just some of it, so we were stuck like glue together. Sounds like you had the time of your life, Kigo said. It was short-lived, Jinjo stated. 33 years ago. 1 month after Jinjo obtained his powers from Natsumai, Jinjo stood in front of Natsumai facing down 2 Soul Reapers. One Soul Reaper was a man with long white hair and wearing a captain's haori. The other was a girl with short blonde hair and gray eyes. There was another Soul Reaper down on the ground that had struck Jinjo with a surprise attack, but the experienced combatant, even before getting his Soul Reaper powers and self-trained during his time off from school, had managed to put the black-haired, headband-wearing, goateed officer down. Jinjo had managed to fend him off, only inflicting bruises with his sword still in his sheath. Who are you people and why are you attacking me? Jinjo asked. I'm one of you, aren't I? Unfortunately, that's only half true, the white-haired captain stated. I'm surprised Natsumai hasn't told you, she's usually such a good girl. Natsumai bowed her head to Jinjo. I'm sorry, Kyujo, I just became so fond of you, I didn't want you to worry, It's okay, Jinjo said, hand on the handle of his blade, other hand affixed to the scabbard. This time he really would draw it out. What didn't she tell me? You, Jinjo Kyujo, are a substitute Soul Reaper. It took us a while to figure out what was going on. When Natsumai stopped sending in her reports, but the hollows were still being taken care of, we sent the Onmitsukido to investigate. We didn't expect to find a substitute Soul Reaper. Normally substitute Soul Reapers only take half the power of their donor Soul Reaper and their power slowly drains away, but you've been under secret observation for 2 weeks now and you haven't lost any of your power. This is a first, and the head captain has ordered that I deal with the situation properly since Natsumai is my subordinate, my 7th seed to be precise. And, what's the order? Jinjo asked. There are 2. Order number 1. Taka Natsumai is hereby discharged from the Godai and exiled to the world of the living for fabrication of a substitute Soul Reaper. You see, we've had issues in the past of other substitutes who sometimes abused the power they were given. Your power is not only permanent, it's stronger than her own. What, and you blame Natsumai for that? Jinjo was having trouble following the captain's logic. There's no blame anywhere in the Godai, only what we are told to do, the captain answered. That's rather stupid. Jinjo glanced to the side. Hey! Show some respect to Yukatake Teiko. The blonde Soul Reaper woman shouted. Calm down, Kian, it's alright, Yukatake stated. Now then, that still leaves the second order. And that is? Jinjo asked. Unfortunately, while Natsumai is free to go, allowed to live her life here in exile, you, Jinjo, on principle are to be executed, right here and now. What? Natsumai was terrified. Oh come on, Jinjo smirked, on principle? Isn't that a bit extreme? We cannot allow a permanent substitute Soul Reaper to exist. That is our law. Kian, go. Yukatake ordered. Yes sir, the blonde Soul Reaper Kian struck forward. She was a quicker striker than Jinjo and she had a ton more experience than him as well. In comparison to the Soul Reaper Jinjo just defeated, Sentaro was slower, but stronger, but much less quick-witted. All around, Qian was the more strategic fighter and someone like Jinzhou was less advantaged against someone like her. With both her hands on her blade she struck in tight quick arcs, often throwing in flurries of stabs at Jinzhou. Jinzhou continued to block every strike that came in, waiting for an opening. He finally got one as Qian cleaved forward too much to Jinzhou's left and missed. Jinzhou struck Qian in the stomach with the pommel of his sword and sent her flying. Qian flipped backwards through the air and landed. Jinzhou took to the offensive and began taking wide, sweeping, single-handed blows, but his strength was overpowering against Qian and now she was in trouble. Or was she? Qian used her Shunpo skill to flank behind Jinzhou and struck from behind, but Jinzhou had sensed her the moment she disappeared and his intuition from fighting hollows told him to turn around and block a strike from the back. However, Qian was far away from him. She hadn't gotten behind to strike at Jinzhou. She knew he'd defend. She got behind him, to release her Zanpakuto. She held her sword and aimed the blade towards her foot. Pounce, Yosaji Noashi. Rabbit's foot. Instantly Qian's sword dispersed into a white light and two gilded white greaves appeared on her legs. Qian, since she knew she'd be fighting, opted to put on the skirt version of the Shiakusho that morning so her legs were bare and she could move around freely. Unarmed she urged Jinzhou forward. Jinzhou put his sword away, surprising Qian. "What are you doing? I'll kill you. You need your sword. If you were really intending to kill me you would have released your sword from the get-go." He glanced over his shoulder at Yukatake. "Also your friend there who's a lot stronger than you would have come at me first. I don't know what's going on, but I'll keep fighting you until I get me answer." Jinzhou urged Qian forward of his own accord. Moving at speeds faster than before, Qian rushed forward and drove a fierce roundhouse kick towards Jinzhou. He blocked with his arms crossed over his body and was pushed back. Qian rushed him and began to relentlessly let loose pointed kick after pointed kick at Jinzhou. He blocked them all. As Qian felt herself losing her balance she prepared to switch to her other leg, but Jinzhou grabbed her by the shoulders and chucked her towards a nearby tree. Qian face planted on the bark. Jinzhou leapt forward with a flying kick and broke the tree in half as Qian dodged out of the way. She then began coming at him from multiple angles and delivered 5 kicks with every flurry. Jinzhou never let his guard down once. The next time she disappeared, as Jinzhou felt her come close, he outburst his Ryutsu and destabilized Qian, giving him an opening to perform a rising uppercut with a downward aerial kick into her stomach as she popped into the air. As she bounced off the ground from the kick, Jinzhou grabbed her by the legs and spun her around 450 degrees and threw her back by Yukatake where she face planted on the dirt. "Sorry sir," Qian said to Yukatake, coughing up a few morsels of soil. "That's quite all right, you did your best," Yukatake told her. Jinzhou stepped up, one hand on his sword's pommel. Glancing at Yukatake, he stood in front of Natsumi as if he still intended to protect her from him. "You know I outclass you excessively," Yukatake stated. "It doesn't matter. I don't exactly buy that. Natsumi is free to go. Jail would be a more appropriate punishment. You're only telling me she's free to go so that I don't have to worry about her and lower my guard, but you also said you're here to kill me, so you obviously want me to fight as if my life depends on it, which I obviously did not have to do. What is really going on?" Jinzhou asked. "Very well, the truth is then that, since you are the first permanent substitute Soul Reaper that we've had, the real order is that we'd like you to take Natsumi's place here in the world of the living. We'd also like Natsumi to continue to coach you as she's been doing. There really is no set law for dealing with substitute Soul Reapers. In fact, Natsumi helped me set this whole thing up when she asked me what we should do with you. Wait, even the part about temporary substitutes?" "No, that part is still true," Yukatake told him. "However, the ones that were problematic were put down or had their memories erased. Jinzhou Kyujo, you are going to be a test case. We are going to place our faith in you, Jinzhou Kyujo." Yukatake tossed Jinzhou a block of wood. "This is your substitute Soul Reaper combat license. You can use this in place of a Jikengan and can even leave your body when Natsumi is not around. So now I really am one of you?" Jinzhou asked and then smiled widely. "Superb. Present day." "I don't understand," Kigo said. "It sounds like everything was going well for you. Why did you betray them?" "Because they betrayed me," Jinzhou answered. "Things were going fine for me as a substitute. I trained hard, graduated, got my first job, did a fine job on the force for 10 years. However, as I trained I learned that I'd never be able to gain the true power of a Zanpakuto because I wasn't a full-fledged Soul Reaper, only a substitute. That was when Yuka Teiko taught me about Fullbring. He said that with it I could combine its powers with my Zanpakuto and it would be just like having a Shikai. I retired from the force because one morning I took a good hard look at myself in the mirror and I noticed that I still looked relatively the same age as I always had since I became a substitute Soul Reaper, Jinjo stated. I started noticing all the weird stares I was getting at work so, I quit. Eventually the only two people who didn't look at me funny were Natsumi and my mom. About you and Natsumi were you? Kigo said and made an open circle with one hand and pointed his index finger out with the other and moved both back and forth into each other. Jinjo laughed, Natsumi and I were like that. She kept asking me that I marry her while I was on the force. I told her I didn't want to put her in danger on the count of some nut I helped put away coming after her. I decided that if Natsumi could transfer her powers to me and I could use this Fullbring then maybe I could transfer my powers back to her and I could stop being a Soul Reaper and I could live a normal life again and so could she. But wouldn't you have split up? Kigo asked. I made a promise to her, told her that after I'd lived a good life and there was nothing for me in the world of the living that I'd come and find her and we could be together. But of course, my dream never came to be. 22 years ago. Jinjo had been off the workforce for an entire month. He had a reservation set for a month from now at a fancy restaurant. His mother and Natsumi had all moved into a small cottage away from the suburban part of town up on the hill. Natsumi's hair had grown longer and she was blossoming into a fine woman. Jinjo was digging the garden that she would later plant. He was wearing a sleeveless shirt and black pants and hunched over on his shovel as he watched Natsumi dance around in a sun hat in a white shirt and an orange dress as birds fluttered about her. Besides working on Bankai training, Jinjo had also found that he could manipulate his father's necklace to transform into a gigantic sword. It was his Fullbring, the Cross of Scaffold. Jinjo had practiced it on hollow fights in soul form, but he also practiced with it and continued to build up his body knowing he'd have to do that once he gave Natsumi back her powers. It worked pretty well. However, today, fate was about to be cruel to him. Out in the countryside Jinjo didn't have TV and he didn't get to see the news every single day. If he had he might have known what was coming. However, Jinjo was certain that the Soul Society was watching out for him. He was their ally, they'd never let anything bad happen to him. Not ever. That day he was proven wrong. The sound of a propeller buzzed over his head and an EU helicopter landed right next to his house. Jinjo was the first to speak up in protest when several soldiers jumped out of the copter. Hey! This is private property, Jinjo stated, if you want to land go find an airport, not my backyard. One of the soldiers answered Jinjo's outbursts by opening fire on him with a shotgun and shooting him right in the stomach. Jinjo didn't die, but he blacked out. Present day. The attack came from terrorists that lived in the EU, but they weren't backed by the EU. They were a terrorist faction of minorities that banded together and were against all other races and nations. This is the same terroristic alliance that attacked the Brighton Neon Towers. They called themselves the Inked Alliance. The name comes from the fact that they all wear a special tattoo somewhere on their body. It's their symbol. Jinjo stated. How'd you find that out? Kigo watched the news and he heard nothing about that. Cause I killed those fuckers, Jinjo said with a grin, every last one of them. I was out for maybe 10 to 20 minutes at best. Had to have been Natsumi and my mom's blood were still wet. Kigo turned wide-eyed. Why you mean they? Yup, killed them and they were on their way into town too. They told me they were after Prime Minister Kurugi and intending to make it look like the EU did it themselves to start a war. You see, after I regained consciousness, and found Natsumi and my mom's dead bodies, I went into soul form and went after them to slaughter them all. One of them, a Hindu, could see me. I made him squeal everything to me and then I gutted him. I went back home and blew up their helicopter while I was at it. But how is that the Soul Society's fault? Kigo asked. Because if they're watching over everything, why didn't they help me? It doesn't take more than 5 minutes or so if you run to go through a prepared Senkaimon. No one came to help me and no one came to offer their condolences to me. Some allies they are. They didn't care about me. They only cared about the work I did. If not for me, then why didn't they interfere at least for Natsumi? I've never understood it. Jinjo gripped his head. He quickly regained his composure. Ever since then I spent my time gathering intel and getting stronger. I found Tsukishima, Jackie, Gerksho, Ririka, and Yukio. Tsukishima found Shishigawara himself, just like Ririka found you. I explained to them what their Fullbring really was just as Yukatake had explained it to me, and I told them this exact same story as I just told you. Don't you see how I was wronged, Kigo? Those bastards hung me out to dry. They only come to my aid when a hollow attacks, but God forbid some terrorists show up, then they can't do jack shit. Jinjo slammed his hand on the armrest. Tsukishima came down the stairs having heard Jinjo shouting. Telling Asano-san our purpose and back history? Tsukishima asked. He was curious. Jinjo leaned back. Actually, I've only heard the backstory, Kigo stated. What do you guys want to do with your powers exactly? That's simple, we want to kill Yukatake Jushiro, the man that ruined my life, Jinjo glared. Do you think we can do it? Kigo asked. Not sure, no one's come up with a plan, but if we're taking you we should make sure your Fullbring is up to snuff, Jinjo stated. We also need to get a hold of a Zanpakuto with access to the Soul Society. I suppose we could steal one from a representative. Why haven't you done that already? Kigo asked. We blew our chances, Tsukishima chuckled. Jinjo and I worked tirelessly squeezing information out of representatives and killing them so that we were not found out. I see, Kigo stated. I know this is a lot to take in, Kigo. I'll understand if you only want to see me as a murderer, but... No, Kigo said with a serious angered face, you were wrong, Jinjo. They should have helped you or at the very least tipped you off about what was coming. Kigo's enthusiasm dropped when he remembered whose team he was supposed to be on. I'm going to go to my room for a bit. Alright, sure. Jinjo stated. Kigo stayed in his room thinking about everything Jinjo had told him. From what he heard, Jinjo was a good person and all of the other Fullbringers seemed like nice people too. True, Kendra was only interested in killing Jinjo, but Kigo knew that if he died the others would attempt to take vengeance and the Soul Society would be forced to kill them all. Kigo had no idea where to put his loyalties. On the one hand, Kendra was counting on him and she was on the same side as Rukia, Vera, and all of his friends from school. On the other hand, Jinjo and the others had accepted him like a brother in arms. In fact, they'd treated him much better than his so-called friends. Could he really betray one group of friends to gain favor with another that barely saw him as anything beforehand? Gah! This is so confusing. Kigo scratched his head rapidly. A knock came to his door. It's unlocked. Ririka entered. Ririka. She grabbed Kigo's arm. You're coming with me? She began pulling him away. Wait, where are we going? Kigo asked. You'll find out where we get there. No, move your feet and follow me, Ririka told him. She dragged him to the coat closet and tossed him a jacket. She buttoned herself up as well with a rabbit ear hood and blue jacket. Kigo's was coyote skin and fur. Wait, we're not supposed to leave the grounds. Kigo said, holding the jacket in his arms. Baka. It's winter, most people are indoors. Put that on and follow me, Ririka complained. Kigo didn't want to argue with her. It was a first for Ririka to approach him out of the blue. He thought this might go somewhere. She led him outside and directed him towards the woods. Kigo followed her through them and eventually they came to a clearing. There was a small house that was falling apart and had boarded up windows. 2 headstones were on the grounds next to a small field of soft soil. Kigo could pretty much guess where he was. Is this Jinjo's old house? Ririka told him. Jinjo said I should show it to you. The seeds of doubt that had been planted by Jinjo had now taken root in Kigo's heart as he saw the aftermath of Jinjo's tale. His fist clenched. Snow began to fall as Ririka spoke. I didn't believe Jinjo's tale when he first told it to me. I thought it was outlandish, but when I saw this everything became clear. Jinjo told me when we first met that the world has become too lenient towards idiots. He's right, you know. There's a long list of idiots too, terrorists, criminals, traitors, bright and neon actors with big egos. The world doesn't deliver justice to them like they should. Who's going to give the retribution to the people that really deserve it? She looked back towards the mansion. I joined Jinjo believing that he was that type of person to do so. Ryrika, Kigo looked at her. Why does the world have to look down on us because we're different? Last I checked, different was a good thing in some cases. We're not freaks, we're all intelligent, so why does the world hate us? Ryrika asked. I don't know how to answer that. Kigo looked away in shame. Ryrika smacked Kigo hard. Baka. You're supposed to say something like, I don't hate you, and hold me or be all, then I'll change the world, and spin me around. Ryrika just realized she that out loud. What? Kigo couldn't believe she had said that out loud either. Baka. She punched him in the face and began to run off. Kigo caught up with her though when she ran out of breath and put his hands on her shoulders. You have 7 seconds to let go of me. Hold on a minute, Kigo told her. What? Ryrika asked, getting agitated. Ryrika, Kigo swallowed, hoping he wouldn't soon find his gonads near the vicinity of his chin. What? Out with it. Ryrika said, still turned around. Would you look at me first? Kigo requested. Ryrika turned around, still pouting. Kigo put his hands back on her shoulders. I didn't know that those were your honest feelings. Baka. Ryrika gasped. What are you saying? What honest feelings? You're such a dweeb. Maybe I am, but I like you, Ryrika. I mean, I know you yell at me a lot, but you haven't outright told me you hated me and meant it either, Kigo told her. Ryrika blushed. She couldn't do anything else. He wasn't exactly wrong and the atmosphere was not helping. Kigo leaned in and then, without warning, he kissed her. Ryrika's body went rigid at first as this was a blatant violation of her personal space and she hadn't said he could do that to her either, but the urge to slap him was suppressed and the urge of acceptance was enhanced. Ryrika put her hand around behind Kigo's head and pulled it down closer to her. The two of them made out right in front of the house. They were going at it for a little while until Yukio's voice resounded in their ears. Get a room, you two, he told them. He was standing by one of the windows and had come by to draw the curtains at Jinjo's request. In anger, Ryrika ran over to him. Yukio. You little shit-face. Why do you have to go and ruin everything? I am going to put you in a doll and put the doll in a blender. She continued to vent like that for the next couple of minutes and got even madder when Yukio closed the curtains on her. Kigo was only able to appease her anger by opening the door for her. Ryrika told him, without raging, that meant nothing and he shouldn't get excited over it either, and that she knew Yukio would keep his mouth shut and all this other stuff that sounded like she just wanted her and Kigo to be friends for right now. If anything, she just sounded confused about what to do, which was fine for Kigo. The situation was the same for him. That night he lay in bed texting Kendra as he always did. He mentioned what he knew about Jinjo and his motives. The two began going back and forth. Kendra, can you get them to come forward? Kigo, does it have to be like this? Kigo didn't want any of the Fullbringers to die. He had come to like them, especially Ryrika. He wanted to know if Jinjo couldn't just be locked up or something. Kendra, your job is to do, not to question. Kigo didn't like that, not one bit. Kigo, is Ichigo okay with this? Surely Ichigo would have something to say about murder for the sake of revenge. They were friends, maybe he could mediate. Kendra, Ichigo isn't supposed to know of this. Kigo, why? Kendra, classified. Classified. That word always came up whenever Kigo asked for any details. It frustrated him to no end. Kigo, these are good PPL. Jinjo is doing a good thing. Why does he have to die? Kendra, he is a traitor. Kigo just glared and didn't send anything back for a few moments. Kendra sent a text of her own as a follow-up instead. Kendra, tell Jinjo Ichigo is the second SSR. See what he does. Kigo refused. He didn't like the way Kendra was being all absolute about all of this. Couldn't she see Jinjo had a good reason for all his actions? What's more, he had helped all of the other Fullbringers and brought them together. Kigo angrily threw his phone against the wall. Kiriko heard the noise from outside. Asano, is everything alright in there, Asano-san? Everything's fine, Kiriko, Kigo answered like his typical goofball self, no problems. Kigo heard the eyeband-wearing man walk further down the hall. Kigo decided he had to make a decision. He couldn't make everyone happy. There was no third option in the choices the game of life was giving him. Kigo decided he'd sleep on the decision and make his final choice tomorrow at breakfast. The next morning. Breakfast that morning was steak and eggs with some cold cereal as an option. Jinjo had to tell Yukio twice not to play his game at the dining table. Kigo was the last one to wake up and he could barely get himself down the stairs. As he slid his feet along the ground, he made for the fridge. "Yo Kigo, bro, you okay?" Shishigawara asked him. Kigo moaned, couldn't sleep, need juice. He went into the fridge and grabbed the fruit punch and then poured himself a glass before chugging it down. Instantly his hair fixed itself and Kigo sprang up and was peppier than ever. "Oh yeah, that's some good fruit punch." He saw how everyone was looking at him. "How did I ever wind up falling for such a goofball, geez?" Ririka sighed. She sat up straight. "Wait, what am I saying? When did I ever decide I liked him? I don't. Yesterday meant nothing." Ririka was having trouble convincing herself of that. Kigo looked at the harmony at the breakfast table and stood at the counter and looked at the empty juice glass. Then he poured himself another glass, drank it slowly and took a deep breath. He had come to his decision. "Everyone, I have something to say." Kigo put the juice glass down on the counter and faced the members of Skyushin. At the head of the table, Jinjo looked directly at him. "By all means." Kigo walked to the seat at the other end. "I need to be honest with all of you," he said with a straight face. He proceeded to tell them what he had been sent to do and what he had been doing. "You bastard," Jackie nearly lunged at Kigo, but Tsukishima pulled her back. "Hold on now," Tsukishima said with a trickster smile, "there's definitely a good reason why he's telling this all to us. Isn't there, Kigo?" "Yeah," Kigo nodded. "You see, the other truth is, that's not what I want to do anymore. I want to join Skyushin." Ririka spit out her juice. She thought this would be the end of Kigo and all of her problems would be solved, but that was a bombshell she had not expected. Luckily for her, Kiriko, who had been sitting across from her, had his napkin tucked into his shirt. Ririka whipped her head towards Kigo. "Huh. You bastard," Shishigawara got angry, "you tell us you're a spy and now you expect us to believe you when you say you wanna join us for real. Don't you play any role-playing games, Shishigawara?" Yukio asked him, "Or do you just stick to brutish fighting games? Stuff like this is not uncommon." Kigo stood up and looked down at the ground. "I know it's hard for you all to believe me, after what I've said, but it's the honest truth. Jinjo, you were wronged and Kendra won't see things any other way even to reduce your sentencing. I really just want to help. I was thinking about it last night and," Kigo slapped the table, other hand clenched up by his shoulder, "I want to be part of Skyushin. I want to help you, Jinjo." Jinjo got to his feet. "Well, I've never been one to turn down free help. All of what you just told us will make it easier for us to act against them too. However, there is one problem." Jinjo looked at Kigo with a serious face. "Can you fight your former friends without holding back?" Kigo looked to the side. "No, I don't think I can," he answered, but quickly looked back at Jinjo with vigor. "But I know how that can be fixed." "Tsukishima," he looked at the bookworm, "I want you to use your Fullbring on me." Once again Ririka spit out her drink and looked at Kigo like he was nuts. "Huh. Tsukishima, if you replace some of my most precious memories with my friends, I'll see you guys as more of my friends than I will Ichigo and the others," Kigo declared. "Jinjo." Tsukishima looked at Jinjo for approval. Jinjo stuck his hands in his jacket pockets. "I don't see anything wrong with it. If they trick you into slashing him again, you can slash him a third time." "Good point," Tsukishima said and left the table to get his bookmark. "How much do they know about us?" Jinjo asked. "The only ones who know about your powers that are an immediate threat are Rukia, Otomaka-san and Vera. If we go after them first we'll be at an advantage. We can even use Tsukishima's power to bring them to our side, Kigo stated. That's exactly what I was thinking, Jinjo smirked. Tsukishima trotted back into the room with an open book, The Razor's Edge. Ah, here it is, Tsukishima said, walking to the other side of the breakfast table towards Kigo, page 117. I can remember that. Tsukishima stood right behind Kigo. This won't hurt a bit, Kigo, he told him, and raised the blade to the air to slash into Kigo to replace his memories. Welcome to our Skyushin. The blade came down. THOK. To be continued. Chapter 118, Tsukishima takes over Karakura town. Third-person POV. Kigo stood around as Tsukishima inserted himself into Kigo's past. To the teenager, Tsukishima was now an old brother figure to him and had been there for him when Mizuho would get on Kigo's case. He even inserted a memory following Kigo's false story of Kigo being kicked out of the house with Mizuho chucking Kigo's guitar at him and Tsukishima bringing him to Jinjo and the others. He still, however, left the fact that Kigo was originally sent to hunt down Jinjo, and Tsukishima convinced Kigo that he was on the wrong side. Tsukishima inserted himself into some of Kigo's fonder memories, like when Ichigo gave him extra quarters to beat demons and devils. Instead of Ichigo, it had been Tsukishima that was there. Kigo stood completely still and let Tsukishima rewrite his entire history so that he could be on the side of the Fullbringers, but still consider Ichigo and the others his friends. When Kigo finally came to his senses, he realized there was no damage from the slash. That is some efficient skill you have there, Tsukishima. You don't leave any evidence behind except in the person's own head, and given time they don't even realize they were manipulated. It's served us well over the years, Jinjo stated. Kigo continued to grip at his shirt and then released it and patted the cloth against his chest. You know, I think I have an idea. Oh? Jinjo asked. Actually, I think you guys have had the solution staring in front of you all along, but you just needed a way to do it without being noticed. I take it you want to use Tsukishima's Fullbring? Jinjo asked. Kigo nodded. If we can manipulate everyone else to join our cause using Tsukishima's Fullbring, we can storm the Soul Society and kill Yuka. Increase the size of our unit by artificially making them our allies. Why didn't I think of that? Jinjo asked. Because it wouldn't work. It's not a foolproof, Tsukishima stated. Kigo looked at him. If a person has a particularly strong will against something and knows that something is wrong, it won't work. We would have a hard time gaining certain allies to our side even with memory manipulation. Kigo could only think of one person that they would have a problem with. Ichigo. He said. Tsukishima nodded and smiled a little. However, I like the idea, and I think I know a way that we can force Ichigo to submit himself to us. It'll take some doing, but I think your plan could work, Kigo. Tsukishima's smile turned crooked and a little psychotic. It just needs a little tweaking. The next day. As per the plan, Kigo would be returning to school as if nothing happened. The idea was that he would lure Kendra out after school and Kigo would bring Kendra, Rukia, and Vera to a clearing, whereby the officers would be ambushed by Tsukishima and the others. It was the perfect plan, or so it was believed. Execution would vary, but the setup was superb. It was all up to Kigo to set things right. It was easy for Kigo to get attention drawn to him to make Kendra think something was up. Besides just his presence back in school, the fact that Kigo was actually paying attention to the lecture and acting smarter than usual was a little frightening to both So-iPhone and Kendra. Ichigo didn't think much of it. He considered the idea of Kigo being smarter than usual a good thing, since Kigo was finally taking his studies seriously. The same applied to the Vizards and Ichigo's Nakama. After classes, So-iPhone pulled Kigo into her office. Is there a problem, sensei? Kigo asked once they were isolated. I should say not. I just wanted to congratulate you for finally taking your academic studies seriously, or so it seems, So-iPhone said, and then rose up from her chair, standing right next to her student. Kendra tells me about this mission she's had you undergo. Kigo had no idea So-iPhone had anything to do with Soul Reapers. I see, so she didn't tell you, So-iPhone said. I take it your return to class is only because you have managed to convince the others to meet with us. Yes, that is absolutely correct. Kigo gave a thumbs up. In fact, I'll take you to exactly where they're waiting for you all. Fine, lead the way. So iPhone and Kigo met up with Kendra, Vera, and Rukia behind the school. Ichigo went off somewhere with Orium, so he was barely able to pay any mind to the lack of their presence as he left the school grounds. So iPhone and Kendra were both suspicious. Kigo had sent no word forward about his return and had said nothing to Kendra about a peace conference. If there had been any sort of notice, they would have brought Ichigo and their guard would be down. Since there hadn't been, their guard was up, but it would do them no good. The members of Skyushin had the perfect setup to take on So iPhone, Kendra, Kigo, and Vera. Upon gaining visual, Kiriko would activate Time Tells No Lies and set a condition upon Kendra, Rukia, and Vera. The moment the three of them drew their swords to attack Jinjo, once he revealed that this was a setup, they would violate the conditions set by Kiriko and burn up. Their Ryotsu would protect them from dying, but it would sting like hell. That only left So iPhone. As Jinjo's information network could not make him certain if she had her Zanpakuto on her, no condition would be set to her. Instead, they'd improvise. Kigo knew So iPhone would never strike one of her own students without probable cause, so he'd grab hold of her to immobilize her, and the moment she would turn to strike him only so that she could knock him away and go after Jinjo would be when Tsukishima would come along and make his move on her using Book of the End. That was the plan, but would it work? That would be up to fate to decide. Upon reaching the Karakura northeastern city limits and going off to the side of the road into the woods, So iPhone and the others saw Jinjo leaned up against a tree. There were several Ryotsus in the area, but they were being suppressed. Jinjo's and Kigo's were much more precedent throughout the general area as they were doing nothing to suppress their own, making it hard for even So iPhone to pinpoint the location of the other Ryotsus. Is that him? Having been out of the Soul Society for nearly a century, So iPhone had to ask Kendra if Jinjo was who she believed he was. No doubt about it, Kendra glared at Jinjo. Jinjo Kyujo, you are under arrest for high treason. If you come quietly, we will not harm your followers. Yeah, about that, Jinjo said and held up his necklace, cross of scaffold. The large two-handed blade appeared. It's an ambush? Rukia exclaimed. Kigo, you traitor. Kendra went for her sword, but the moment she drew her blade a bright green flame incinerated her and she dropped to the ground in a heap. What? But, that's not a power of your Fullbring, Rukia gasped. No, it's mine. Kiriko stepped out from behind a tree. Vera took the opportunity to strike, but when she drew her blade she also fell to the ground. The conditions that Kiriko had set were, upon Jinjo releasing his Fullbring, no Soul Reaper could unsheath their Zanpakuto for the next 10 minutes. As Jinjo was not in the conditions, but rather the catalyst, he was not affected by the conditions. Upon Vera collapsing, Rukia charged. Rukia, don't. So iPhone called out, but the senior officer's anger had gotten the better of her and she too made the mistake of drawing her sword. So iPhone made to take her frustrations out on Kigo, but a pixelated black vortex suddenly sucked him up. Invaders must die. Yukio downloaded Kigo into his Fullbring to protect him, leaving So iPhone completely unguarded and alone. She knew better than to draw her Zanpakuto, having recognized the pattern. If you think we Soul Reapers are nothing without our Zanpakuto, you have another thing coming. So iPhone leaned back on her right leg and took a left lead stance with her right arm at her waist and her left arm turned sideways, prepared to chop. Jinjo Kyujo, I, Fong Shaolin, will subdue you myself. So iPhone rarely used her nickname nowadays since she had gotten so used to using her real name over the years of being a working-class Japanese citizen. She still responded to it and adored it, as Yoriyuki and her friends from the Godei still called her that. However, she was about to find out how easily those bonds could be shattered in mere minutes. Jinjo charged at So iPhone, but as he came in she rotated her hands backwards as if moving bike pedals with her hands, and then, using her Ryotsu, she let fly a right-handed punch and blew Jinjo back into the tree. As she was still in Jigei, since she had just come from the school, she was not moving too fast for the other Fullbringers to see when she used a burst of Shunpo to reach Jinjo. That little difference would make all the difference and make a pivotal change in the events that would follow this skirmish. As So iPhone approached Jinjo she felt a blade pass right by her back, but there was no wound. She stopped her charge, wondering if she had been cut. Her hesitation and confusion allowed Jinjo to use Bringer Light and move away from her and out of her clear line of sight. Overhead the grey skies, already having formed starting as early as noon, crackled and things began to pour, cutting So-iPhone's visibility immensely. "Come on out you cowards," So-iPhone egged as her hair was soaked by the rain and she flared her Ryotsu as high as it could go in her Jigai. "I'll break every last one of you." Dirty Boots, accepting So-iPhone's challenge, following Tsukishima and Jinjo's plan, Jackie came right at So-iPhone, but the assassin heard the splash from the quickly dampening grass and felt Jackie's boot go sailing through the air and blocked the incoming kick with the back of her arm and then gripped Jackie's leg and threw the dark-skinned Fullbringer along the mud. Jinjo came back at her with his blade. As So-iPhone's Jigai was not meant for blocking blades with her bare skin, she resorted to dodging Jinjo's attacks until her opening came and finally she saw one and took it. She punched Jinjo as hard as she could and sent him slamming into another tree. Jackpot knuckle. Shishigawara leapt from his hiding spot up the tree that So-iPhone was standing right in front of, back to the trunk. He nearly hit her shoulder, but she was able to dodge and kick him into the mud. Time tells no lies, Giriko attacked the nimble assassin with the numbers on his pocket watch. So-iPhone gracefully dodged the 12 shots and struck towards Giriko, but Jackie came at her right flank and So-iPhone was forced to abandon her commitment to attack and backflip away from the dark-skinned woman's strike. Jackie took a leaping kick strike at So-iPhone, but the assassin-turned-teacher dodged to the side and under Jackie before rushing towards Giriko again. However, as she neared the sharp-dressed, eye-banded Fullbringer Tsukishima stood between her and her target. Seeing this, So-iPhone, as if it were instinct, did a backflip and held her ground. When she finished she realized how odd that was. That was weird, why didn't I just take them both out? When I saw that other guy appear in front of that butler-looking guy I suddenly felt as if I was about to make a huge mistake. I don't know him from a hole in the wall. It's not like he's Yoriuki. Upon envisioning her mentor, So-iPhone's mind suddenly placed Tsukishima over Yoriuki. What was that just now? Are you alright, So-iPhone? Tsukishima asked her. How do you know my name? So-iPhone asked. That hurts me, So-iPhone, Tsukishima said, throwing his arms wide. It's me, Tsukishima, your lifelong partner and idol. I don't know what you're talking about. My idol is Yoru Ichi. Upon trying to recall the fond memories between her and Yoriuki, So-iPhone found her mentor slipping away more and more, replaced by the man in front of her. What's going on? So-iPhone panicked. And no, her memories being overwritten, Tsukishima was rewriting any memory So-iPhone could recall. Every happy moment between her and Yoriuki was being replaced as soon as she recalled it. Every damn one. So-iPhone clutched her head and dropped to her knees. Stop it. Get out of my head. Don't be like that, So-iPhone, Tsukishima told her calmly, but I understand, you're just frightened and upset by the negotiations failing and learning, which side I've always been on. But it's okay, Tsukishima told her, we'll always be together, you and I promise you that. The last memory, So-iPhone's fondest memory with Yoriuki, the dark-skinned woman's faithful promise to So-iPhone, was in the midst of being overwritten. It was all So-iPhone had left. So-iPhone started to cry as she found her mind going numb from her memory being rewritten. Yoriuki, help me. So-iPhone collapsed upon the ground. Tsukishima saw the short Soul Reaper passed out on the ground. I've never seen an individual so susceptible to my full bring before. I only needed to overwrite that dark-skinned woman, Yoriuki, I kept seeing constantly, and that was all it seemed to take. Tsukishima, while Kendra, Rukia, and Vera were still unconscious, gave them all a swipe with his Book of the End. Jinjo, you okay over there? Yeah, we'll be fine, I think, he said as he, Shishigawara and Jackie all got to their feet. Using a box Ririka had brought with her, they proceeded to transport their felled victims to their base. There they could use Yukio and Kigo's full bring to restore Rukia, Vera, and Kendra back to health, and, that evening, they would make their next move. 10 p.m. The rain persisted until well after supper time. Yoriuki was getting worried. So-iPhone was always home well before she was ever since Yoriuki started her job. Despite the fact that she didn't speak to her with an honorific all the time, though Yoriuki still had to remind her on some occasions, So-iPhone still insisted on pampering the former captain, much to Yoriuki's chagrin. It was just how So-iPhone was. I was raised to serve you. That is my mission. I will be right at your side forever and always. All of my devotion is to show my appreciation for being able to stay at your side all these years. I cherish you, Yuruaki. So, in light of So iPhone's statements, Yuruaki felt it would be rude of her as So iPhone's life partner to stomp on her feelings like that. Still, she was able to bring So iPhone around when things were too much. If I say it's alright, okay. It never took more than that to cow So iPhone into submission more times often than not. There were some arguments, but every couple had those. But now, standing here with no dinner prepared in the apartment exactly the way the two of them left it that morning, Yuruaki was becoming worried. Not only was So iPhone not home and the chores hadn't been done, there was no note either. Not from her and not from Urahara. She picked up the phone and dialed. The phone rang 4 times before Yuruaki heard the following. If you'd like to place a call to this number, please hang up and try again. If the problem persists, try calling your local helpline. Yuruaki dropped the phone and backed away. Her first instinct was to tear towards the Urahara shop and figure out what was going on, but things were too unnatural to just charge blindly. She had to think. She had to. Crack. The door to her apartment was thrown wide open. Kensei appeared with Bankai in tow. While he was currently the only visored here, all of the visards had gotten caught in Tsukishima's trap approximately 1 hour ago. However, rather than use the same dry tactic, they instead used So iPhone and Kendra's lightning-quick reflexes to bind and subdue the visards before Tsukishima bookmarked them. And, currently, the Fullbringers were in the midst of doing the same to Urahara's group, and now they had the firepower to take on the shopkeeper and his massive assistant, Tessai Tsukabishi. Kensei, what are you doing? Yuruaki snapped at him. Kensei didn't answer her, he simply attacked, decimating Yuruaki's apartment. The Nubile woman managed to escape the explosion by tearing into the night sky. Kensei followed. Because of Tsukishima's influence, posing as a lifelong best friend, Kensei believed every word he said when Tsukishima told him and the other visards that Yuruaki was plotting to kill Jinjo. Through So iPhone's memories, Tsukishima could tell that it would be impossible to cow Yuruaki the same way he had cowed So iPhone and was currently attempting to do to Urahara. Well, there was that and the fact that Yuruaki was the knot that tied several of these individuals together. If not for her existence, Lelich would have never convinced So iPhone to help him and the visards would have never have made as clean a getaway. If she was cut down, then there was no chance of the others returning to their senses unless Tsukishima bit the bullet. Yuruaki managed to cross the entire town in a few flash steps, but eventually she was cornered at an abandoned warehouse in the Komatsu district all the way at the southeast end of the town. Yuruaki was panting in fear as she tried to make sense of everything. Urahara's phone had been knocked off the hook when she tried to call. Kensei, one of her comrades, or so she believed, attacked her, and on top of that So iPhone was missing. Then, suddenly, once again, she was attacked and the attack came in quick. Yuruaki did her best to dodge, but still didn't escape the attack all the way, and then she saw the Hominksa crest appear on her lower left leg. Before her, Shiakusho and all, was So iPhone. BB. Yuruaki was surprised to see her looking, for the most part, unharmed, but there was something wrong with the way So iPhone was looking at her. Her eyes, they were staring at her as if So iPhone was about to come at her with lethal force. Who are you to call me by that name? So iPhone demanded from Yuruaki as loud as she could. Yuruaki's eyes became panicked. What are you talking about? So iPhone, it's me. It's Yuruaki. Yuruaki put her hand on her chest. I don't know what you're talking about, So iPhone said with a dark glare, the only person qualified to call me that is the man I love, Tsukishima, Shukuro. What? Yuruaki didn't understand. So iPhone, what the hell are you talking about? I'm the one you love. We've been together ever since. I don't know anything about you. So iPhone snapped. Yuruaki didn't know how to respond to that. If she took So iPhone's words at face value, then. So iPhone, don't you remember me? Yuruaki sounded heartbroken. Enough. So iPhone shouted and stuck her arm out straight at her side, poised to attack. Shukuro told me you would try to trick me, but it won't work. Die. So iPhone charged at Yuruaki with Suzumibaki. Using her best shunpo, Yoriyuki made it so that she could dodge each and every one of So-iPhone's strikes. What's the matter? Is dodging all you were capable of? Shukuro said you were the self-proclaimed goddess of Flash. Where is your shunpo now, Shihoin Yoriyuki? So-iPhone taunted. It's because I don't want to hurt you, Yoriyuki thought to herself as she looked at So-iPhone with anguished eyes. What's happened to you? Why don't you remember me? So-iPhone, Yoriyuki started to tear up. You're slow. So-iPhone said and struck towards Yoriyuki's stomach. I'm sorry, So-iPhone. I don't know what's happened to you, but you leave me no choice. Shunko. The Hakuda and Kido mixed technique formed around Yoriyuki and pushed So-iPhone away from her. Yoriyuki's eyes glowed white in the moonlight and her orange overcoat was blown completely off her torso. The tip of Suzumibuki chipped from the impact. I don't know what's happened to you and I still don't want to hurt you, So-iPhone, but I won't let you kill me either. Yoriyuki shouted. This is for your own good, So-iPhone, I'm sorry. Yoriyuki apologized and attacked, but that's when things turned even worse for Yoriyuki. As she struck forward, a crimson shield blocked the strike. This technique. Yoriyuki watched as she shield shattered from the impact of her fist and stared at the person between her and So-iPhone, Urahara Kisuke. I'll take things from here. Your job is done, you managed to track her down and hold her. Shukuro says he'll see you back at the hideout, Urahara told So-iPhone. Understood, So-iPhone left. So-iPhone, wait. She's under no obligation to listen to you and neither am I. I'm surprised, Yoriyuki. If Tsukishima hadn't had So-iPhone and Hirako's group with him, I wouldn't have believed you could turn traitor, Urahara told her. Kisuke, what the hell are you talking about? Yoriyuki shouted, shocked to hear the shopkeeper's serious voice. You can't play dumb with me, Yoriyuki, it won't work. Scream, Benihime. Urahara attacked Yoriyuki with the slicing attack from off his Zanpakuto towards the former squad captain. Yoriyuki deftly dodged out of the way. Hado 54, Hyene. Yoriyuki dodged the Kido. Urahara attacked her with his beam attack again. She dodged. Even Kisuke? What do I do? Ever since he became a captain, except when it came to speed and Hakuda, Kisuke's always had the upper hand against me. Yoriyuki stated. What's the matter? Don't you want to fight back? Urahara asked. No, I suppose not. Like me, you never take anything seriously, but, against someone like you, I can't afford to hold back. Urahara's blade began to glow. Kisuke, don't do it. Yoriyuki shouted. Urahara's blade stopped glowing. You really don't want to fight me, do you? Urahara asked her. Of course not you, well I guess you don't know that anymore, Yoriyuki told him. Then, I will spare you, but, instead of dying by my hand, you will run. Run away, Shihoin Yoriyuki, and never return. Bring a message to Lelouch and Yukatake. Tell them the time for repentance has come, Urahara said gravely. Yoriyuki ran away. She ran and she headed west until she was completely alone. Then, from her cleavage, she pulled out a golden plastic wristband. Holding back tears, she hit the transceiver button. 0, this is gold. I need pickup, there's been complications regarding the incident surrounding Jinjo. Yoriyuki was only waiting a few minutes before a Senkaimon opened complete with Hell Butterfly. With a heavy heart, she walked through it to go to the Soul Society. Without Yoriyuki to interfere, and Urahara, the Vizards, and So-iPhone under his control, Jinjo felt unstoppable. There was no one to stand in the way of completing Phase 3 of Tsukishima and Kigo's plan. While Ichigo slept soundly, completely unaware as to the goings-on out in Karakura town, Tsukishima, cloaked using a Bakudo 26, cast by Vera, snuck into the humble abodes of Orium, Chad, Uryu, and Tatsuki and used his full bring on each and every one of them, and Yoshino. So as not to alarm Ichigo, at least not yet, Tsukishima left his house alone. The next morning. Ichigo woke up that morning, yawned and stretched, did his usual morning routine and headed off to school. Since his dad wasn't comfortable with him driving in winter, Ichigo took a public bus to get closer to his high school and then walked the rest of the way. It had been a good morning for Ichigo. His dad hadn't assaulted him, he didn't have to stop any sort of crime on the way to school, and despite the cold temperature there was no sign of precipitation. Of course, the sunny weather was in stark contrast to the thunderous storm Ichigo would be forced to endure over the course of the rest of the day. Things went wrong fast the moment he got in the building and visited his locker. All of his friends, except for Mizuru, were absent. There was no word, no warning, and when Ichigo asked Mizuru about Vera before class he acted like he didn't know her or Rukia, which only could mean that they had gone back to the Soul Society, or rather that's what Ichigo was forced to deduce. When Ichigo asked about Kigo, Mizuru said he hadn't heard a thing. In reality, Rukia, Vera, and Kendra's involvement in the world of the living had been shut off. Of course, they weren't the only ones. And that revelation would press the button in Ichigo's mind that was labeled panic. Oka Misato, the teacher that normally substituted for Soifone the very few times she was out, walked in with lesson plans. Nothing out of the ordinary, except Soifone rarely ever took time off, and without Tatsuki here to ask on his behalf and no one else willing to stand up and ask, Ichigo left it to himself to ask before Oka-sensei started the lecture. "Yes, Kurosaka-san?" Misato asked. "Pardon me, Oka-sensei, but, where's Fung-sensei, did she say anything?" Ichigo asked. "Who?" Oka-sensei answered. This was new. Even when Soifone had been absent, or so he heard from Mizuru and Kigo during the time Ichigo went to rescue Orium, Soifone's excuse was that she had a personal emergency to attend to. The fact that Oka-sensei now didn't even know who Soifone was bothered Ichigo immensely. Ichigo resisted the urge to lash out. Whatever had happened, there would probably be an explanation in a couple of days. However, his troubled state was obvious to Oka-sensei. "Ichigo, if there's a problem, maybe you should go to the nurse's office." And no, that's okay. And never mind, forget I said anything." Ichigo sat in his seat and waited patiently for the lunch bell to ring. Ichigo had absolutely no idea what he was in for. His day was already getting progressively worse when none of his friends were answering their cell phones. Unbeknownst to him, Jinjo had taken everyone's cell phones and confiscated them while they were unconscious, giving them different cell phones so that Ichigo would never get in contact with them. Kigo had everyone's numbers listed on his cell phone and he knew enough not to answer Ichigo's number. To make matters worse, Mizuru had told Ichigo that Oka-sensei had always been their teacher. At the end of his school day, Ichigo just wanted to get home and figure things out using the brain his genetics had bestowed upon him. Ichigo never bothered to add Urahara to his list of contacts, and he knew that he could find the man's business card on his desk somewhere. After walking in the door, Ichigo dashed upstairs, entered his bedroom and paced the floor trying to think of what the problem could be. After a few minutes of coming up with nothing, he dialed for Urahara. "We're sorry, the number you have dialed is currently not in service." Ichigo dropped his cell phone and stared at the wall. This was starting to get weird. Ichigo's panic button had already been pressed and the meter that would send him into a full-blown terrified and anguish mode was slowly rising. As he stood there with a blank stare, his phone buzzed. It was a text message from Kigo. Ichigo dropped to his knees and let out a deep breath. However, the message was not what he expected at all. "Kigo, meet me at Mashiba Park, I'll explain what's going on." Kigo. How in the hell would Kigo know anything? Ichigo asked himself. If this is a prank, it's not a very funny one. "Unii-chan, where are you going?" Yuzu asked him. "Out," Ichigo answered. "Out where?" Yuzu asked innocently. "It's nothing for you to worry about," Ichigo said and opened and closed the door, leaving Yuzu to her worries. He slipped on his dark blue jacket that he had been carrying over his shoulder before stepping outside and headed northeast. The weather had gotten colder since this morning and the sky had gotten dreary. Fog was also beginning to settle over the quiet little town. Ichigo made it to the park roughly 30 minutes later. He knew Kigo had a small amount of Ryutsu, since the kid had once seen him in soul form and honed in on it. He found Kigo in the woods near the park, waiting for him. Kigo was dressed in his school uniform, same as Ichigo. He was dressed in a blue jacket, like Ichigo's. The only difference between them was the guitar case leaning on Kigo's leg. The chilling winter wind blew through the air. "Kigo, what's going on?" Ichigo asked him. "Ichigo, Did you know that there's another substitute Soul Reaper that exists, besides yourself? Kigo asked. Ichigo's reaction was a shocked expression at first, but he switched it as quickly as he could to something more joking. Is this some new game you invented, Kigo? No more games! Kigo shouted. Ichigo's expression turned serious to match Kigo's. No more games, no more lies, and no more shutting me out of the loop, Ichigo. I've had it. You always shunned me, dissed me, and took me for granted. I know about it all, Ichigo. I know about everything you've done, all of your adventures. You can't hide the truth from me any longer. I'll prove to you that I'm not lying. Kigo ripped the guitar out of its case and played one note as he strummed the guitar. Greatest guitar ever. The guitar transformed into Kigo's full bring. Ichigo's expression was once again that of pure shock. Okay, so you know, now what's this about another substitute Soul Reaper? Ichigo asked. Seeing Kigo use a strange power was proof enough for him that arguing would be pointless. Right now, until he could know more, right now, he'd just have to listen to Kigo. Didn't Yukatake tell you when you got your combat pass? Kigo asked. He told you that laws were created because other people like you were deemed useful and given the pass that you used to transform. Your predecessor, the man I've been helping these past few weeks, his name is Jinjo Kyujo. However, this is a lie. You get your pass regardless of whether you are useful or not. Your pass is meant to monitor and track your spiritual pressure, Ichigo. It's meant to keep you weak whenever you are not in soul form. A fat load of good it did me when my hollow took command of me, Ichigo bit back. That's not the Soul Society's fault. That was yours according to Jinjo, but what is their fault is this scheme they've cooked up. They say they'll help you and be your allies, but are they really someone you can trust? Ichigo, with the bad mood he was already in and now Kigo bad-mouthing the Soul Society, ran towards Kigo and lifted him up by his shirt. Take it back. Everyone in the Soul Society is an ally that I've helped and has helped me. How dare you even suggest such a thing? Kigo remained as stoic as ever. They came at you with lethal force when you transformed into a monster. If you're not with them, you're against them, Ichigo, just like Jinjo. You're not an ally, you're a temporary useful servant, that's all they see you as, nothing more. Ichigo punched Kigo in the face and let the boy stagger back. What exactly is it you want, Kigo? I called you out here because Jinjo and I have a question for you. Will you join us? Join you in what exactly? Ichigo asked. We want to kill the man that came up with this twisted substitute Soul Reaper scheme and the man that ultimately betrayed Jinjo, Yukatake Jushiro. In seconds Ichigo's badge was in his hands, thrust into his body, and his blade was drawn, aimed at Kigo. Do you really think I'd agree to something like that? You said you'd explain what's going on. Where are Tatsuki and the others? All of our friends are here, Ichigo, Kigo said. Hey guys, Ichigo's looking for you. He called out. From around Ichigo out of the forest came Tatsuki, Chad, Orium, Uryu, and Yoshino. You guys all agreed to this? Do you guys think of what you're doing? Yukatake's the second most reasonable captain in the Godei following Lelouch, and now you all want to kill him? What the hell's the matter with you? Please tell me this is just some sick joke. Of course they agreed to it, a voice said from behind Ichigo. The teen turned to see Tsukishima looking at him with a calm, serene smile, because I told them to. Ichigo scowled at Tsukishima. What the hell are you playing at? They have all awakened to their true memories and now they'll do anything I tell them. Isn't that right? Hi, sensei, Tatsuki answered. Affirmative, Uryu answered. Yes, Yoshino nodded. Chad nodded silently. I will do anything for Shukuro, Orium answered. The sensation of discomfort running up Ichigo's spine was like a very large tarantula with feathers attached to its legs was walking up his back. Ichigo looked at his friends and saw how all of them seemed to be against him. What are you all saying? We don't even know this guy. What? How dare you? Tatsuki shouted at him. How could you have forgotten Tsukishima-san? He came with us to the Soul Society to save Rukia. He came with us to Hueco Mundo to save Orium. He was there to comfort Orium and me when you were turned to stone. Tsukishima was even the one who helped you rescue Yazuo. How could you stand there and pretend to forget our greatest and best friend like that? But I. Tsukishima smiled softly. It's fine really, after all, Kurosaka-san has always been jealous of me. He was even jealous of me when you and I started going out, remember Orium-chan? Orium blushed, hi. Orium's single-word answer reverberated in Ichigo's mind like a bell atop a chapel. He could stand his friends being mistaken and this could all be some big prank gone too far, but he knew one thing. He knew that Orium's feelings for him were for him and him alone. The very idea that Orium had been manipulated into thinking her feelings were for someone else meant that this was all real, and that made Ichigo very, very angry. To lie to his face about a mistaken event could be rehearsed, but feelings, pure sincere feelings like Orium's love for him could not be trampled upon, and he had come to love and protect her the same way he loved and protected his sister, if not more. No, it was more. Tsukishima had not tapped Ichigo's berserk button. Tsukishima had taken a nuclear warhead the size of Pendragon to it. Ichigo was pissed off. He saw red. One thought was in his mind right now: kill Tsukishima. Get Chuga, Tensho. Ichigo roared at the top of his lungs and blasted the fierce energy beam at Tsukishima. In the blink of an eye, Tatsuki was in between Ichigo and Tsukishima, utilizing her final form. What the hell is wrong with you? Tatsuki shouted at him. Me? You're the one defending a stranger. Ichigo shouted. You can't honestly tell me you don't remember Tsukishima. He's always been there for us, Ichigo. For fuck's sake, he was at your mother's funeral. Ichigo scowled deeper. There was now no word in the dictionary to describe his level of hatred and anger in his heart right now. To him, Tsukishima needed to die, and quickly. Tatsuki. Move. Now. No. I won't let you hurt Tsukishima. Damn it, Tatsuki, this is not a request. I'm telling you to move now. Ichigo said, and held his sword arm out straight and placed his left hand on his right elbow. Or I swear, I will fight you. Us, Chad said, getting in the way. Ichigo couldn't be afraid. His Ryutsu surged. He could call Bankai at any moment, but the thought of using that on his friends just to get them to see reason, he was hesitant to go that far. To make matters worse, this was not their fault. Ichigo, are you betraying us? Kigo asked. It's all right, Tsukishima stated with that same smile that was like a flag flapped in front of a stir-crazed bull. Ichigo has always been a regular dog of the Empire, metaphorically speaking, of course. That did it. I'll show you, dog of the Empire, Ichigo said and surged his Ryutsu. Bankai. For the first time since getting his upgrade from his hollow, Ichigo went into Bankai. He was deeply hurt that it was under these kinds of circumstances. In his new Bankai state, gloves had been added to Ichigo's Bankai's form, which meant approximately 1.1 more times Ryutsu than he normally had in Bankai, even with his hollow already doubling his powers with the power he had put into Ichigo's body to begin with. Besides just the gloves, Ichigo also had longer coat tails, adding another 8.5% increase to his Ryutsu. Also, his blade had 3 protrusions along the blunt end of the blade near the tip of the sword, which seemed to have increased in length by a few decameters. You really are a stubborn fool, Tatsuki said, and attacked Ichigo with a fierce, fire-imbued punch. Ichigo blocked without even moving and clamped down his gloved arm on Tatsuki's leg, completely putting out her flames. I'm sorry, Tatsuki. I really don't want to fight you, Ichigo said with downcast eyes. With an anguished expression, Ichigo threw Tatsuki towards a tree. Chad followed Tatsuki's lead and attacked Ichigo with a blast from Brazo Dericha del Gigante. Ichigo imbued his blade with Getchuga and let the attack impact on the blade. Then, with closed eyes, he got within striking distance of Chad and delivered a regretful blow to the side of Chad's neck to knock the titanic half-Hispanic out cold. Ichigo turned towards Tsukishima, but the book reader was further down the road. My, you've gotten stronger, Tsukishima smiled, further pissing Ichigo off. Ichigo, far beyond reason and understanding, charged, ready to impale Tsukishima with his blade. However, before he could get anywhere near the book reader, Ichigo soon found himself flying upside down, or what he perceived to be such. Ora, I thought we taught you better than this. Ichigo stopped dead in his tracks when he heard Shinji's voice. Hirako, not you too. Ichigo looked at the blonde with anguished eyes. Ichigo, I always thought friendship and understanding was your forte, but I guess I was mistaken. I don't know what Tsukishima's done to deserve your hate, but he's a close friend. I can't let you go at with that kind of force, Shinji told him. I don't want to fight you, Hirako, move. Ichigo shouted. Yeah, like you'd even get a scratch on me with your senses inverted like that, Shinji said, twirling Sakanade in his hand. Ichigo, we owe Tsukishima our lives, and that's a lot more than Yuka-take or any of the other Soul Reapers ever did. What about Lelouch? Ichigo shouted. Who, the captain of Squad 10? What about him? Shinji asked. Sure, he's a great strategist, but what of it? Ichigo was speechless. How could Shinji forget all of the good Lelouch had done? Ichigo was about to open his mouth in response when an angry shout came from behind him. Kurosaki Ichigo. Ichigo turned to see So iPhone standing behind him. Fong-sensei. Ichigo looked at her with bewildered eyes. I don't know what your problem is, but no one attacks Shukuro. She shouted. What's going on? From the sound of it, it's almost like she doesn't even know who your Yuaki-san is. There are some things that cannot be forgiven, Kurosaki, So iPhone told him. You were my favorite student when it came to your martial arts training, but I will not let an intent to inflict lethal harm on Shukuro go unchecked. While Ichigo was confronted by his former allies, or rather he was former to them, Tsukishima stood by Kigo. How long do you think it'll take before he snaps? Kigo asked. I'd say. Tsukishima was cut off by Ichigo suddenly, somehow, breaking past So iPhone and Shinji and making a beeline for Kigo, grabbing him, pinning him against a tree and putting his blade to his throat. What have you done to our friends? I didn't do anything, Kigo said, it was all Tsukishima. The blade was pressed in closer, almost cutting into Kigo's skin. Kigo decided not to beat around the bush. We replaced their memories to get them to our cause. We, that is to say Tsukishima, Jinjo, and me, knew none of you would ever agree to this of your own accord. We also thought that you would resist even if we did replace your memories. If you want to end the pain, Ichigo, you just have to surrender yourself to us. We'll make all the pain go away. What gives you the right? Ichigo glared. You haven't heard Jinjo's story. He was betrayed, Ichigo. The Soul Society betrayed him. His mother and one of their own were in danger and they didn't lift a finger to help. Jinjo was shot. He still has the scar, Kigo told him. They didn't even offer condolences afterwards. That doesn't even come close to justifying any of this. How does it feel to be the unfavorite, Ichigo? All of our friends want nothing to do with you if you won't help us kill Yuka-take, Kigo told him. Kigo, this blade is inches from taking your head off your shoulders, Ichigo told him. Orium will just reattach it with her power, and besides, you would never hurt me even as I'm talking to you. I'm your friend, and as long as I am that to you, you would never use lethal force against me. Isn't that right, Ichigo? Ichigo let go of Kigo. Kigo was right. Ichigo would never use lethal force on a friend. Tatsuki walked up behind him. Ichigo, please calm down. All can be forgiven if you apologize to Tsukishima-san. He's an understanding person, you know that. Kurosaki-kun, please make amends with Shukuro. I don't want to see you two fighting, Orium told him. Ichigo, Chad walked up, apologized to Tsukishima-san. We don't want to fight you either. Come on, Ichigo, Tatsuki told him. Ichigo, Chad called to him. Kurosaki-kun. Ichigo. Ichigo. Kurosaki-kun. Ichigo was starting to get worked up. His rage was starting to crack and his resolve wavering. The tip of his blade hit the dirt, still held in his head. Ichigo. Tatsuki called to him, confused. Ichigo stared at the ground, making his expression unreadable. However, it was obvious when tears dripped from his eyes. I thought our bonds would last forever, that we'd always be friends. On the same side, share the same values, fight the same fights. I didn't think our friendship could be shattered so easily. Ichigo said and vanished through one use of Shunpo. Ah, Ichigo, Tatsuki reached towards where he had been. Kigo rubbed his neck. Let him go, he said. Orium, can I get some first aid? Orium went over to use her Soten Kishun on Kigo. Ichigo went to the old abandoned railway station in Karakura town. He figured he could be alone here. Invisible or not, he didn't want anyone around to see him in such a pathetic state. Ichigo stood next to the closest indented corner and stuck his blade firmly in the ground and hunched over it, sniveling, trying not to break out into full-blown bawling. "Hurts, doesn't it?" A voice called to him. "It's like a void in your heart carved so deep, you feel as if your heart needs to be several times its size for there to be anything left of it." Ichigo recognized the voice and turned away from his blade, but still gripping it. He saw a woman in a black, sleeveless shiakusho with furred sleeves attached for warmth. She had dark skin and long purple hair. "Why, you're Yuaki. You okay?" she asked him. He shook his head and turned back to his blade. "And no, there's no way you're here to check up on me. Can't I be? I lost someone very precious to me and I'm not allowed to seek another grieving heart in order to feel the slightest bit better." "You're Yuaki?" asked. Ichigo turned back to look at her. "I wasn't attacked. I'm on your side, Ichigo." "Why, you're Yuaki?" Tears were starting to go down Ichigo's face freely. The noble woman spread out her arms to him. "I'll comfort you, Ichigo," she told him. Taking her words at face value, finding that the alternative would make him far too depressed, Ichigo let his blade fall to the floor and ran towards Yuaki and hugged her. She made him feel safe, holding him to her and pressing his head against her bosom. "Yuaki. Shhh, it's okay," she told him. "Cry if you need to. I'm right here. My bosom is your pillow." And cry he did. Ichigo wailed like he was back in elementary school having gotten his butt kicked by Tatsuki at martial arts practice. Yuaki stood there and let him empty himself of tears. "We're going to get them all back, Ichigo," Yuaki told him. "I promise you, we will get them all back." Ichigo continued to cry until he was done and then he and Yuaki let go of each other and he wiped his eyes. "Thanks, Yuaki. It's okay. Besides," she pointed behind Ichigo, "we have the ultimate weapon to get your friends back." Ichigo turned around and gasped. Standing before him was a figure with short black hair, violet eyes, and wearing a captain's haori with a dark green inside fold. "Hey." Ichigo's surprise turned into a smile as he was so happy that if anyone had to have been behind him just now it was that particular person. "It's good to see you again, Lelouch." "Same," Lelouch stated. "So," Ichigo said, "what's the plan?" "Before I answer that," Lelouch held up a finger, "Ichigo, we didn't tell you about Jinjo because we wanted you two to face off. What Kigo said to you about how you're just a servant to us, well, he's half right. Substitute Soul Reapers are given their license as long as they prove useful to the Godai, otherwise they are renegade traitors. The mistake of not telling Jinjo that Soul Reapers cannot enter living world affairs caused his turn, but you already know that, don't you?" Ichigo scowled. "I see, then it's like I said before, it doesn't come close to justifying his reasons. Even if Jinjo hadn't set up this whole scheme and Kigo hadn't joined up with them and all this chaos hadn't started, I'd still be on the side of the Godai." "Explain, let me hear your words verbatim," Lelouch said, putting his thumb and forefinger to his chin. "Even if I had no family ties, even if I wasn't as closely connected with some of the higher-ups like you and Hisuna, I would still fight for the Godai because it was thanks to you all and Rukia too." Ichigo with tremendous effort and focus called for Tensou Zanjutsu and managed to telekinetically call it to his hand. He held it out in front of him parallel to the ground, "that I gained the power to protect what it is I want to protect. And that is my friends and my family. As long as I have that power and as long as you are not responsible for taking away my power unless even I can agree that it's my own fault for the loss of my power, I will never betray the Godai, no matter what. I owe you guys a lot. I am your ally forevermore. I am a friend to you, to Hisuna, to Kaien, Kenpei, Stefan, Rukia, Kyokaku, everyone. To everyone that considers me their ally, I am theirs as well." Ichigo held his sword upside down in front of Lelouch. "That bond will never be broken." Lelouch reached out and gripped the base of Ichigo's blade's handle. "Well said, my young protege," Lelouch said and let go, letting his cape flap in the breeze of winter air. He slung his sword over his back to activate his Shikai and then went into Bankai. He'd need it at 1/5 his power for the plan he had in mind. In fact, he thought he may need Gentai Kaijo as well, so he had applied for it ahead of time. The moment he needed it, if he needed it, the limit would be removed. Now, Lelouch said, holding his cape up by his helmet, let's go save your friends. Let us go and destroy Tsukishima and Jinjo. To be continued. Chapter 119, Lelouch vs Fullbringers. Third-person POV. Yesterday. 10:30 p.m. Yuriyuki stumbled through the Senkaimon. She was staggering with a limp and confused, mortified eyes. Her lifelong partner and lover Soifone didn't remember who she was, and not like it was an act either. The person she cared about in her long afterlife more than anyone else had been stolen away from her, brainwashed to a point that Yuriyuki couldn't reach. It crushed Yuriyuki's heart and wounded her emotionally, carving into her very soul and breaking her inside. She wanted to cry, but she needed someone to comfort her if she was going to break down. Yuriyuki stumbled towards the Siritii, eyes still dead, walking with instinct. Her body knew her destination, 10th Division. Upon wobbling into the division, she wandered right into Kyoko's sights. The Shiba woman had come out into the night air for a smoke. Not seeing her friend herself from her angle, Yuriyuki, tired and drained, fell forward. With a single flash step, Kyokaku kept her friend from hitting the ground. Easy Yuriyuki, I got you. She told the dark-skinned former captain. Kyokaku could sense that, physically, Yuriyuki was not suffering, so logic and reasoning pointed to a much more sinister cause to her current state of affairs. She hoisted her friend's arm over her shoulder and wrapped her arm around Yuriyuki's back for support, grabbing Yuriyuki's other hand to keep her from falling over. I'll get you to Lelouch. Whatever's going on, I have a feeling he can help you out. Kyokaku brought her traumatized friend to Lelouch's office. By this point, Yuriyuki was getting over the shock and now starting to break down. Yuriyuki walked into the middle of Lelouch's office in a daze. Did she come here alone? Lelouch asked Kyokaku. Seems that way, Kyokaku said with a concerned nod. Mental and emotional scars are your business, Lelouch. If you find out what's going on, I'd appreciate a heads up though. Yuriyuki's one of the only real friends I have in this world. Don't worry, Lelouch responded with a serious nod, she's in good hands. I know, Kyokaku said and walked away to go back outside and resume her nightly smoke. Lelouch walked back around to stand in front of the yellow-eyed former noble and was about to say something when he saw the tears in Yuriyuki's eyes. They began to trickle down her cheeks and she sniffed once or twice before grabbing Lelouch forcefully, pulling him to her and sobbing into his chest. This wasn't a howl or a wail, but a true broken-hearted, unusually somber sob. It was the kind often mistaken for laughter due to its pitch and speed. Lelouch comforted his longtime friend until she calmed down. He'd never seen Yuriyuki like this. Whatever had happened had to have been very tragic. He did his best not to get excited or anxious. He knew this had to do with the Fullbringer mission. He could bet his soul on it. However, he was not absolutely certain what had brought Yuriyuki to this state. He could think of several things and none of them were very pleasant. Yuriyuki cried for a good 15 minutes before she returned to just being silent and went limp and into her own little universe. Lelouch sat her down on his couch and draped a blanket around her and gave her some hot tea. He sat on the recliner and moved it next to the couch until Yuriyuki snapped out of it, looking at her eyes, waiting for her to come back to her senses. He sat there in silence with nothing but the clock ticking as he stared at Yuriyuki, watching and waiting. Eventually she did finally come out of it and took a big slurp of her tea. She still looked very distressed though. You seem a little okay now, you want to tell me what happened? Lelouch asked her. Soifone, something happened to her. She no longer remembers me, Yuriyuki stated. Tsukishima, that bastard. Lelouch knew of every last Fullbringer and all of their powers ever since Vera gave him the report when she got it from Kendra, who got it from Kigo. From Yuriyuki's one statement, Lelouch could formulate the rest of the situation in his head. Between the fact that Vera hadn't contacted him since yesterday, Soifone being affected by Tsukishima's Fullbring and the reports he had received prior to this point from Vera, it was obvious to him what had happened. Well, almost everything. How did you get here? The naturally occurring Senkaimon in Karakura town, Yuriyuki asked. Karakara town has one of those. Naturally occurring Senkaimons were a rare phenomenon only existing in 1 in every 250 worlds. The fact that Earth not only had a naturally occurring Senkaimon, but that it was in Japan and on Earth no less was a fact Lelouch didn't know about. Only Kisuke and I know about it, Yuriyuki stated. At the mention of Urahara's name, Lelouch asked, "Did you encounter him before coming here?" "He also perceives me as an enemy," Yuriyuki said sadly. "What did he say to you before you came here?" "Anything." It was almost as if Lelouch was expecting Urahara to deliver a message. Yuriyuki picked up on that and looked at Lelouch. "Ah, he did tell me to tell you that the time for repentance has come." Lelouch perked up at hearing that and then smiled as he ran his hands through his hair. "I see, I think I understand the situation a little more now." "You do?" Yuriyuki was confused. "I'll file to depart for Karakara town immediately. I want you to eat something, get some rest and we'll ship out tomorrow. Meanwhile I'm going to ask Nimue to monitor Kurosaki Ichigo's movements starting at 9 AM tomorrow morning. I'll have a better understanding of the situation with that information at my disposal." A normal person would question Lelouch's antics, but Yuriyuki knew Lelouch well enough that mostly everything he did somehow led to some ingenious plot in the end. She did as she was told and by 2 PM, she and Lelouch were ready to depart. Present day. 4 PM. Sarakami City. Ichigo, Yuriyuki, and Lelouch marched through Karakara town at a slow pace so that they could conserve energy and have a chat about the situation while they made their way towards the manor of the Fullbringers. The sky was turning grey and thunder was booming every other minute. "Are you sure we're going to be able to take them all with just the 3 of us?" Ichigo asked. "We'll be fine," Lelouch stated, "I have reinforcements on the way." Since I'm already in charge of the situation with Jinjo, getting permission to come here was simple. However, for those I asked to accompany me it'll take a little longer. Nevertheless, time is of the essence, we cannot wait for them. Besides, we'll be fine for the early rounds. Lelouch smirked and glanced back at Ichigo and Yuriyuki. "I have a secret weapon." "You mean that thing Jin said you had that let you beat Aizen?" Ichigo asked. Yuriyuki was caught off guard knowing next to nothing about this ability. "I see, so Jin blathered did he?" Lelouch said wryly. "He didn't say much," Ichigo stated, "all we heard was that you had a special ability to control people that works on only one person and only once on that person." "Jin said that." Lelouch looked at Ichigo with a serious look. Part of that was a huge lie, but Lelouch wasn't about to reveal that. Ichigo scratched his head. "Well, Kyokaku mentioned the inability to use it more than once. Jin had formulated Iin Tamashi might use it on me while you two were separated." Which she did of course, but Ichigo had no memory of that. "I see, is there anyone currently under Tsukishima's control that was at that meeting?" Lelouch asked. Ichigo scratched his head. "Just Rukia and Tatsuki I think, though both of us also did see you use it on Aizen." "I see, if that's the case then Tsukishima knows I have that power." Lelouch stopped talking and simply began to think. "And if I take the potential of Giriko's Fullbring into consideration I have to plan ahead." Lelouch looked around and tried to locate a polished surface as quickly as humanly possible. He managed to find a silver car parked outside a home. He then proceeded to take his contact lens pack out of his pocket. "What are you doing?" Yuriyuki asked. "In order to keep my geese, the power you were told about Ichigo, from being permanently active, I wear special contacts to keep me from accidentally geesing someone I don't want geesed," Lelouch stated. "Sounds like you made a boo-boo at one point," Yuriyuki said, but the joyous demeanor of her statement earned her a demonic glare from Lelouch. Yuriyuki was shocked by the glare, wondering just how bad he must have screwed up. "Sorry, didn't mean to offend you." Lelouch turned around and removed one contact. "Normally I simply remove my lenses and activate the geese with a simple tug and removal, like you saw me do with Aizen. However, one of the Fullbringers can make so that I'll immolate the moment I attempt to remove said contact lenses. If I do things this way, I just have to be careful, but I can make it so that I catch the Fullbringers off guard. All I ask, Yuriyuki, is that you don't look at me directly so long as I have my lenses out. I don't want to geese you by mistake. Just what's the worst that can happen?" Yuriyuki did not seem to understand the limits of Lelouch's power. "The worst that can happen?" Lelich stared at the ground, both lenses now out, case gripped in his palm. I lost someone very important to me because of the worst that can happen. It happened when I was young and stupid. But Yoriuki was about to say something, but Ichigo cut her off with an arm gesture to push her back. Don't, he told her, when Lelich is ready to talk about it, he'll talk about it. We can't just go stomping on his feelings without covering them in dirt. If Lelich eventually wants to tell us, that's when he should tell us, not before. Until that time comes, we shouldn't force him to relieve such a painful memory. Lelich's grip loosened and he felt a little better. Thanks, Ichigo. No problem, Ichigo said. Lelich put away his case and then loomed over the surface of the car. He was confused as he stared at his reflection. Ichigo, come here for a second, he waved the teen over. What's the matter? Ichigo asked. Look at my reflection, Lelich said, still staring at the car. Do you see anything unnatural reflected in my eyes? Ichigo was confused as to Lelich's question. Like what? Like a glowing symbol of some sort, the same symbol on the back of my gloves and cape, Lelich stated. He was still in Bankai after all. Ichigo looked at the back at Lelich's cape, then at his reflection. He couldn't really tell, the car wasn't the best of reflection. Look me in the eye, I'll get a better visual. Ichigo requested. Lelich did so. Ichigo stared for a few moments and then shook his head. No, I don't see anything. Lelich panicked a little. There were several dire possibilities in his head right now, none of them good. Lelich reached into his pocket and whipped out the lens case. The lenses were in there. So then what was going on? I guess this means you've reached the final stadga, Iin Tamashi told Lelich. Final stage of what? Lelich asked. Geese, Iin Tamashi answered. How would you know anything about the geese any more than I would? Lelich asked. As a spirit, yours no less, it is my very nature to understand the full extent of all of your powers, powers even you do not fully understand yourself. Did you think having a permanently active geese was the final stage of one's geese? Iin Tamashi asked. It's actually only the second. The second? Lelich was confused. There are 4 stages of geese: reception, incontinence, duplication, mastery. The first and second stages should be obvious, the obtaining of one's geese and that infamous time when it becomes permanently active. The third stage is achieved when the geese emblem is reflected in both eyes. And then, over time, the geese reaches its final phase, mastery, in which the geese becomes effective in the same manner as it was the first time, but with the added effect that the wielder now has the ability to accept an immortal code from a giver of the geese itself. But how did I reach that final stage? You said I wouldn't age a day until after I slew my other self. It has nothing to do with your biological clock, Lelich. Iin Tamashi explained and then sighed. Allow me to lay things out on the table for you. Do you remember when you grabbed CC when she paralyzed Suzaku at Narita? Yes. It was in that moment that you created a psychic link between you two. In other words, you created a minimal, negligible amount of spiritual power in your body, which you took from CC. In other words, the moment you grabbed her was the moment you created our eventual union and gave birth to my consciousness. Huh? Did you think that being born and dying with one's soul reaper was restricted only to after death? Iin Tamashi asked. While a normal human can never become an actual soul reaper, the basis for the creation of one is inherent within all souls that will have spiritual power either upon death or during their life. However, your power was so minimal that you wouldn't have been able to see. Even the weakest spirit in Hollows would never have found you. However, I was there, and at the time I was just a small fragment from CC's soul that had entered yours and now mingling with your future symbiotic partner. Lelich had a thought and gasped, wondering if he could predict Iin Tamashi's next statements. So then when my geese became incontinent. Yes, I had fully manifested as a consciousness deep inside you and lay dormant deep within your soul until such a time came that I would be needed. I was still asleep, but my body manifested and surged. After the surge, well, I'm sorry. Lelich's only response was a simple, I see. When you geesed the collective unconsciousness of mankind, you used that small fragment of spiritual power within you, and I was forced to give you what little power I had to make it possible for you to succeed. The strain on your body entered you into the third phase of geese, duplication. So why am I only now reaching mastery? It's been more than a century. Normally your biological clock would have had to wear off the effects until I was in a deep slumber, which would have carried on until you reached your mid-30s, but you died very young. Because of the temporal paradox, it became nearly impossible for you to gain mastery anytime soon. However, Muramasa fixed that arrangement. Lelich realized where this was going. Of course, you and I separated. Exactly. Under normal circumstances the geese was yours and yours alone. Even while materialized during your Bankai training I never had its power for my own, though I was immune to it since you and I shared a soul. However, upon forceful separation I gained its power, and upon returning to your body I was granted access to freely manipulate the strain on process to bring to the final geese stage. I didn't mean to frighten you though. I did plan on telling you eventually. Lelich brought his thumb and forefinger to his chin. So this means I have to manually activate the geese emblem, correct? Yes, and you can do it in either eye too thanks to the duplication process. Iin Tamashi stated. Does that mean I can use the geese twice on the same person now if I use a different eye? Lelich asked. That much I do not know. I know it won't work on Ichigo again though, since you and I are now whole again and he's already been affected by it twice, once by me and once by you. I see, Lelich smirked, covering up his left eye with his hand. Then this should prove interesting. He ended his conversation with his Zanpakuto and continued his march with Ichigo and Yoriyuki. Let's pick up the pace, I have a plan and I'll explain on the way. While Ichigo, Yoriyuki, and Lelich made their way towards the Fullbringer's location, Tsukishima and the other Fullbringers waited for them to come. They knew they would. Jinjo predicted that, given the memories Tsukishima had seen, that Lelich's weird power would be used to overwrite his Book of the End. However, as Lelich had predicted, Kiriko was prepared to set his timer the moment they got visual of Lelich. For added fun, every last one of Tsukishima's brainwashed minions would fight Yoriyuki and Ichigo. There was no chance of victory for the Soul Reapers. Once Lelich and the others were down, they would take the captain's Zanpakuto and use it to create a Senkaimon and gain access to the Seirai, where they would go to the 13th Division and murder Yukatake Jushiro. A clever plan, but flawed with the planning ahead Lelich had done. Tsukishima, Jinjo, Kigo, and the other Fullbringers were confident in the plan. While the group waited for the enemy to arrive, Kigo was storing up on food, scarfing down Tsukishima's cooking as if he was trying to eat as much as humanly possible in a short amount of time. Can't you eat like a normal human? That's disgusting. Ririka chided as she stood over by the linen closet. RFUD. RINT ROPEing it, Kigo said with a chicken leg in his mouth. Ugh. Chew and swallow before you talk. Ririka bitched at him. That's repulsive. Kigo did so and gulped down half a glass of water. Sorry, he said and faced forward, it's just, I know I'm going to have to confront Ichigo, so I figured I should eat a lot. More energy means more fuel for me to use. You're just going to wind up with a stomachache. Spiritual power doesn't work like that, Baka, Ririka told him. It doesn't. Kigo had no idea. This isn't anime. We don't get more energy from eating a lot of food, not prior to fighting anyway. Besides, we're humans, not Soul Reapers. We don't have bottomless stomachs, Ririka told him. Kigo whined. Geez, Ririka looked to the side, how is it I let him kiss me? He's a total dweeb and a dumbass. Baka. Kigo stood up and stared at the ground, it's scary going out there, you know. Ririka looked at Kigo as he entered serious mode again. Of course it's scary. This is going to be a life or death situation, you Baka. How could you think otherwise? No, I know that, but, I felt it when Ichigo came after me. He's really powerful. Ririka could see Kigo's hand shaking as he gripped the chair. How can any of us stand up to someone like him? I mean, Ichigo won't hurt any of his friends. He won't kill them, but, does Jinjo even have the power to beat someone like Ichigo? Baka. Ichigo won't get past Urahara or the Vizards. We have the perfect defense. Even if he brings Yoriyuki or that Lelich guy Jinjo keeps mentioning, we're fine, Ririka stated. Wait, Lelich. Because of the fact that Lelich was in Karakura town, anything regarding him was remembered by Kigo, which meant every instance he had been in class. He's the captain of Squad 10 apparently. He must have disguised himself as a normal student in your school, Ryrika told him. Yeah he did. Kigo's memory of Lelich was limited. He remembered the black-haired, purple-eyed young-looking man as being intelligent, crafty, and having worse attitude issues than Ichigo when it came to being social. Well, he's not going to be able to do anything. Giriko's Fullbring will take care of him, the Vizards will take care of Ichigo and Yoriuki, and then we'll all take care of Yukatake, Ryrika told him. Kigo simply nodded his head, but as he thought about it he remembered the ire in Ichigo's eyes. Ichigo would not go down. Ichigo would never stop. He'd fight and he'd kill Tsukishima and Jinjo without question. What if that extended to every Fullbringer except him? Kigo feared. Ryrika. Kigo suddenly grabbed her arms. What are you doing? Let go of me. She raved. You need to promise me something, Kigo told her. I don't need to make any promises to a dweeb like you, Ryrika frowned at him. Just listen to me, okay? Kigo exclaimed. Ryrika shut her mouth. I'm scared. I know you're all confident that Ichigo won't win, but what if he does, Ryrika? Just what if he does? He might hurt you and I don't want to lose you. What the hell would you have me do then? Ryrika was shocked by Kigo being so forward. I want you, if things look grim, I want you to grab my hand and we'll run. We'll run away together, change our names and live a new life elsewhere, just the two of us. Kigo had to be out of his mind. That would never work. Ryrika pushed off him. Baka, she blushed, we'd never be able to pull that off. We don't have any money. We'll work something out, Kigo promised. Look, Ryrika, all I'm trying to say is that, when this is all over I want to come out of it alive, and I would really like it, if you came out of it with me. Ryrika blushed harder than she ever had. No one, not a single person had ever said something so sweet to her. She turned to face Kigo, still red in the face. Kigo, she walked towards him. I care about you, Ryrika. I really believe like you're the one. I know that sounds cheesy, but I just really like you, okay? I know you've gotten on my case and everything, but I've just been so attracted to you and you've always given me the time of day even if it's negative, and I just... Ryrika put a finger to his lips. Her eyes reflected how touched she was by Kigo's words. She was smiling and doing her best to keep control of her emotions. Baka, I get it. Just shut up, Ryrika told him. She walked into his intimate space and their lips met, tongues swirling about inside their mouths like gears turning on a machine. Kigo held onto Ryrika's shoulders and then looked at her with a serious look. No matter what happens, I just want you to know how I feel, even if you haven't come out and said you feel the same. Kigo pushed past her and began to walk away to go get some last-minute training in Outback. Kigo, wait, Ryrika tried to call to him, but the words were stuck in her throat. She decided it was best not to instill false hope into him. After all, despite her confidence, Ryrika was scared too. She knew anything could happen and that she might die. And for that much she didn't want to claim Kigo's heart and not let him move on if something did in fact happen. She just stood there for a moment, looking down. Then she picked up his plate, scraped the food into the garbage bin and dumped the plate into the sink before heading upstairs to peer out the window and wait for the arrival of the enemy. It was a full half-hour before Lelich, Yoriuki, and Ichigo finally showed up, and it wasn't a subtle approach either. Lelich's first order of business, get everyone's attention, and he knew exactly how to accomplish that. Get Chuga Tensho. Upon hearing the loud declaration, Urahara leapt into action and used his blood mist shield to absorb the majority of the strike and then watched as Lelich appeared, standing on air. Giriko set the condition of his watch. Within the next 20 minutes, if the tips of Lelich's fingers came within 5 mm of his pupils, the condition would be violated. That meant even to put his contact lenses back in, even if he had removed them beforehand, would still activate the condition. They had him. Or so they thought. Lelich was too far away for a good visual. My former allies, those of you who have been brainwashed by Tsukishima, I command you, fall asleep. You will fall asleep until I tap you with the pommel of my sealed Zanpakuto. Until then, go to sleep. Lelich commanded. Using only his right eye to activate the geese, Lelouch locked in on every last member of Tsukishima's defense forces. The only people unaffected, Urahara, Shinji, Mashiro and Kensei. Inside the building, Jinjo saw the whole thing and looked at Tsukishima. Whose dumb idea was it to have all of the people we brainwashed outside and waiting right where they could be affected? That would be Urahara. Tsukishima's eyes turned wide with the fear of realization at the utterance of each syllable of the shopkeeper's name. He rushed outside to remedy the situation, but upon attempting to do so found Urahara popping like a balloon. Moments later Urahara appeared a few meters away facing the opposite direction and ran his thumb and forefinger along the brim of his hat. What was? It's a prototype specialty of mine, a portable Jigai, Urahara announced. When you attacked me back at the shop you attacked what you just destroyed now. But, all of your memories, they were. Tsukishima was confused. Yeah, they flooded into you. Yeah, that's the magic of it. My portable Jigais are technically me, they can even move around on their own and act like me, so I let you hack one since your full bring doesn't leave visible marks so it didn't damage the Jigai. So after you hacked the Jigai and replaced its memories I entered into it and faked everything. It was tough pretending to have two different memories since I was not only able to see my own history, but also your changed history. It was a strain on my brain, but it paid off. And when you came to attack me now, I detonated my Jigai and exited it via flash step, leading us to this very moment. Tsukishima grit his teeth in anger at being outmaneuvered and ordered Kensei, Mashiro, and Shinji who were still standing. He took in another deep breath, him. Awaken, Urahara said as he drew his cane sword, Benihime. A red wave of energy exited his sword and pushed the vizards back. Lelouch, I've got these three. The rest are all yours. Lelouch nodded and proceeded to dive towards Tsukishima, but stopped short when a fist connected with Tsukishima's face and sent him flying into a tree. Yuriyuki stood in front of Lelouch and glared at Tsukishima. Her Ryotsu was surging. She was pissed off. Lelouch, she spoke with ire in her voice, get back. Tsukishima is mine, Yuriyuki told him, holding in her rage. I suppose you have that right, Lelouch said and then used flash step to go near Ichigo. Yuriyuki glared at Tsukishima as she grabbed him by the neck, threw him into the air, used flash step to get above him as he came sailing towards him and then spun in place rapidly before landing a fierce spinning kick into Tsukishima's back sending his body spiraling into Sakurami City. She used flash step to get near him and stood across the street from him as he lay against the wall to a parking lot of an old abandoned apartment complex. Get up, Yuriyuki spat at him, that couldn't have finished you. You might have a few broken bones, but you have to be still alive. I haven't had the satisfaction of bludgeoning you to death yet. Tsukishima got to his feet. Yuriyuki had badly injured his spine with her kick just now. He could feel it threatening to crack. Every step he took was one of immense pain. So you're really going to kill me? Tsukishima asked and spread his arms wide open, so then kill me, but let me ask you. Will killing me fix everything? Will it restore the memories that I've altered? Or are you just lashing out at me in blind rage? I don't have time, Yuriyuki leapt at Tsukishima with a flying kick, for your mind games. She missed. Tsukishima dodged out of the way long before Yuriyuki had gotten halfway to him. He was off to her side. What happened? Tsukishima asked. You missed. Yuriyuki glared. The cement support beam crumbled as she stood on her feet ready to strike again, collapsing the parking garage. Don't you get it? Tsukishima asked. I used my full bring on So iPhone, known to the world of the living as Feng Shaolin, your mentee. She trained under you for more than a century, but when I inserted myself over you, it became I who trained her instead. Do you understand what that means? Tsukishima asked. That you're a bond-stealing vampire. Yuriyuki glared. And that I'm going to rearrange your face with my cat form's claws after your head rolls off your shoulders. Hardly, Tsukishima chuckled only to use bringer light and appear right behind Yuriyuki about to strike. It means that since I've clashed with So iPhone as you that I have your physical strength and speed. Tsukishima struck, but he missed in Yuriyuki. My strength and speed. Don't make me laugh, Yuriyuki told him as she stood atop the destroyed parking garage and then, In one flash step drove her elbow into his neck, sending him spiraling into a nearby flower garden. You're only human. There's no way that you could possibly have my full power. I'll grant you that you can stand up to me in Jigai form, but you could never stand up to me in soul form. You would remove your Jigai and affect the world around you negatively. Tsukishima asked. Ryotsu surfaced from Yoryuki, thick white Ryotsu like she was activating Shunko, but there was something different about it. I would sacrifice any number of lives, buildings, and landmarks if it meant I could kill you. You hurt someone very precious to me, stripped her of my bond to her, and for that, I will kill you with everything I have. Yoryuki announced. Her right eye flashed as her Ryotsu continued to surge. She, Kisuke and the Vizards had all developed a technique meant for exiting the special Jigais they had created. All they had to do was sync their soul with their mind and surge their Ryotsu past the Jigai's limits so that it was at its breaking point, then they would utter the command phrase to eject from the Jigai. This would be Yoryuki's first time ever using it. In the battle with Talbumasuke, she was the only one who held onto her restrictive Jigai, not wanting to eject unless she absolutely needed it. True, Urahara was the better fighter than her, but that was only in terms of Zanjutsu and only when her power was restricted. Through her constant training with Soifone, using her special Jigai, Yoryuki had managed to maintain a captain-level Ryotsu within her restrictive Jigai. That meant, once removed, she would become 5 times stronger. In other words, once her restrictive Jigai came off, she had the power to go toe-to-toe with even a Bankai-wielding Yukatake or Shunsui. Anohana, well, Yoryuki never wanted to consider the possibility. The bottom line though was that, unrestricted, Yoryuki's power was more than even the base Ryotsu of any of the Vizards and even Urahara Kisuke. It was at least twice as powerful. Urahara being the least experienced, Yoryuki had more than 200 years of seniority as a captain over the other Vizards. Tsukishima was about to learn the hard way that the laid-back, promiscuous, former captain and self-proclaimed goddess of Flash was a woman not meant to be trifled with. As a result of sinking her body, Yoryuki, already without her orange coat, lost her headband, leaving only her scarf on her body, along with her tight-fitting black uniform. She then uttered the command phrase. Shoten. Ascension. There was a surge of energy as Yoryuki's Jigai dropped to the ground and she exited it into a Shiakusho. In it she still wore her captainly garments, but with her Haori tucked around her left shoulder and her hair, which had grown longer in the course of 100 years, remained the same. Due to Yoryuki's immeasurable power, the ground beneath her began to crack and the entire area became spiritually charged. Tsukishima was choking on Yoryuki's Ryotsu. Yoryuki assumed a 3-pointed stance. I want you to feel all of my anger and all of my rage when I drive my fist into your chest, rip out your heart and feed it to you. But, she tensed her leg muscles, I won't kill you immediately. Kisuke can handle himself against Hirako and the others. Before I kill you, I want you to feel every ounce of my pain. I want you to know just how much of a line you crossed. With a quick flash step, Yoryuki darted forward. Tsukishima couldn't even follow her. The next thing he knew, Yoryuki had his arm in her hand, his sword-wielding arm. With the difference in their Ryotsu, Yoryuki only needed to apply the force necessary to crumple a piece of paper in order to completely crush Tsukishima's wrist. His Book of the End dropped to the ground and Tsukishima cried out in pain. Hurts, doesn't it? Yoryuki asked rhetorically. And if you think that this is nothing, know that I only used a flash step at 40% of my maximum speed to reach you this quickly and that this is only 30% of the force I am capable of. Do you understand? Yoryuki shouted and brought her foot down on Tsukishima's blade, snapping off a piece of it which she then grabbed as it flew into the air as she reached behind her back. She then spun on a dime, pulling Tsukishima with her and slashed him wide across his chest above his pectorals, but beneath his collarbone. Tsukishima staggered back as Yoryuki let go of him. He dropped to his knees. You think that to defeat us is justice? Do you know why we fight? Tsukishima asked as blood poured from his mouth. If you had any justification at all, you're choosing the wrong time to bring it up. If Jinjo had a grievance, he could have brought things to the attention of the Soul Society before they considered him a lowly traitor. Jinjo's predicament does not concern me though. She choked Tsukishima as she held his neck, squeezing so hard she'd suffocate him in under a minute. He began to flop about like a fish gasping for air. My concern is you and what you did to iPhone. I don't care if killing you doesn't bring her back. There are other solutions. But I love her more than anyone else in this world, and I rescind your right to live because you came between us. As a friend of mine might say, your life became forfeit when you used your blade on my pride. Yoriyuki then pulled back her fist and decked Tsukishima in the face so hard with a Ryatsu-charged punch that she literally tore his head off. Yoriyuki took a look around at the destruction she had caused simply by exiting out of her Jigai. It was worth it, she said to herself. She then walked over to her Jigai to get back in it. The moment she returned to Jigai though, Tsukishima's body burst into a green flame. On the battlefield, Kiriko had set a new condition: Tsukishima was not to die within 5 minutes of engaging Yoriyuki. If he did, everyone else currently fighting would all become burned by the flames of time. True, he could have set the condition to affect Lelouch directly by simply naming names, but Lelouch was still under the effect of his previous timer, which could not be overwritten as the clock was still ticking on it, and Jinjo wanted to be able to speak with Ichigo alive. Due to the damage they had already done to each other in the time that it had taken Yoriyuki to completely wreck the crap out of Tsukishima, they were susceptible to Kiriko's attack. That is one nasty pocket watch, Lelouch said, appearing on the scene to face Kiriko. It's too bad I have to destroy it, and you. Upon making that declaration, Jackie, Shishigawara, and Yukio all surrounded him. 4 against 1 in close quarter combat like this I can't even activate my geese. In the time it would take for me to make the declaration, my concentration would be broken from an attack from behind, or they could move out of the way. I'll have to settle this the old-fashioned way. Lelouch surged out his Ryatsu. Are you sure you're up to this challenge, with only the 4 of you? 4. Shishigawara looked around. Hey, where the hell are Ririka and Kigo? Flying the coup as we speak, Lelouch said with a smirk, I can sense it from here. The moment Kigo sensed Yoriyuki's monstrous Ryatsu, which I knew she would release in order to kill Tsukishima, he took Ririka and fled. And you're just going to let them go? Yukio asked. I've got to deal with you all first, don't I? Besides, I have had this planned out way better than any of you, Lelouch told the blonde boy. You really think you can take on all of us at once? Jackie asked. Watch me, Lelouch said, and used his teleportation cape to leave the area littered with sleeping bodies and beckoned the Fullbringers to chase him out into the woods and up the hill so that they were in the area where Jinjo's old house was. Yes, here is perfect, this is where I crush you all in an instant before you have time to blink. Kiriko didn't know what to say. There was no knowledge in any of the Soul Reapers Tsukishima had brainwashed of Lelouch's skill set. Or rather, it was more accurate to say, not a complete one. And Lelouch knew the one technique that he had only used once, and none of the people that Tsukishima had brainwashed could have ever seen it or knew its name. With it he would take the Fullbringers off guard and crush them all. A bright orange magic circle appeared beneath the feet of Lelouch and all of the Fullbringers surrounding him, forcing them to take a giant leap back. Shoken Kinshi. Invaders must die. Yukio attempted to download Lelouch before the technique could complete itself. He had a full battery and had emptied his storage space, so there was no trouble at all. However, Lelouch was ready for that and used his cape to flee the area and get behind Yukio and the others. Shikumo. Another technique Lelouch rarely used, and the only other one he didn't in front of the Vizards. The thick black fog covered the battlefield of the Fullbringers, but the slow-moving fog gave them the opportunity to escape. While Yukio succeeded in downloading Lelouch's horror onto his Fullbring. The Ryatsu of the creature was too powerful to contain and exploded out of the game station, crushing Yukio underfoot with its massively huge leg in the process. Time tells no lies. Kiriko blasted Lelouch's horror with his watch's numbers, only for the gigantic creature to swat Kiriko with one of its massive arms and cut him into 4 separate pieces. As the arm came in, Kiriko set one last condition, that if he should die within the next minute that the monster would burn with him. Still, Lelouch didn't need his massive horror to defeat the last 2 remaining Fullbringers, Jackie and Shishigawara. Kokoro Hasai. With his Bankai amplifying the technique and the large Ryatsu difference between him and Shishigawara, the punk kid's head inflated and exploded. The blood covered Jackie's Fullbring and she attacked Lelouch. Dirty boots. She whiffed as Lelich used a flash step to dodge her attack, but then used another flash step in quick succession to get right behind her before she could react. Black and purple energy twinged in his fingers. The spell he was casting was overkill, but it would get the job done. Heido 90, Kuro Hitsuji. The spell ripped through Jackie and she fell over as the black coffin, at 1/15 its true power, ripped her apart. And then there were two, Lelich said, and waited for the last of the plan to finally come together. By now Ichigo and Jinjo were clashing blades and Jinjo would obviously be using the Bankai of his full bring. Lelich shook his head at the thought. Full bring made no sense sometimes. As for Ririka and Kigo, Lelich had a plan set in motion. The killing of the other Fullbringers was Lelich's own personal preference. He had read all the reports, heard all the information Kigo had gotten Kendra. Despite their backgrounds it didn't come close to joining Jinjo, and going along with his plan to murder Yukatake. It was like when he killed all those children bestowed with geese, he had to destroy the problem before it became an issue. Of course, while that was the Soul Society way of doing things, he had his reasons for killing the 4 dead humans before him. Kiriko, simply put, was scum in Lelich's eyes, lowly scum. Yukio, by betraying his parents, neglect or not, there were always ways before that kind of vengeance. There was no way Lelich was going to let him grow up and become a psychopath or a corrupt corporate executive. Shishigawara would have continued to fight against the Soul Society due to Tsukishima's death. He was too loyal, therefore death would save Ichigo and the Soul Society some headaches in the long run. And as for Jackie, Lelich had read her report as well. Leaving her alive would have had her beg for death and he was in no mood not to grant that request. Then there was Ririka, which, as much as Lelich hated to admit it, would be a casualty. Well, that was assuming she would be killed by his reinforcements. As Kigo and Ririka ran they had both seen Lelich's monstrosity come and go and could feel the pulsations of Ichigo and Jinjo's clash. Like Lelich had said, Kigo took off running the minute he felt Yoryuki's ungodly riotsu. As Lelich also predicted, Kigo, coward that he was, intended to take a train or boat, whichever he could find, out of the area and to another sector of Japan. Unfortunately he'd never hit the Sarakumi city limits. As Kigo and Ririka ran, with the guitar-wielding teenager leading the cuteness lover by the hand, Kigo finally stopped to catch his breath. He figured he and Ririka were far enough away now that they would never be found, so they could stop for a few minutes. "This is stupid," Ririka said. She was holding back tears. "What do you mean it's stupid?" Kigo asked. "We're getting out of here." "But we're the only ones getting out of here." Ririka shouted, tears in her eyes, and stared at the ground. "I may not have given much of a fuck about the others, but they were still my friends and they're all dead, I can sense it. Jinjo's going to die too. I wish I could have saved the others," Kigo stated, "but I made my decision. I told you I wanted to survive this clash with you and that's exactly what I'm going to do." "Kigo," Ririka hyperventilated. She and Kigo kissed again, with Ririka curling her leg back behind her. When they parted, Kigo turned and looked forward. "Come on, we've got a lot more miles to cross," he told her. "Wait," Ririka called to him. "What is it?" Kigo asked her, looking at her. Ririka was staring at the ground. "I just want to say that, as long as we're stopping that, when we first met that I thought you were a dweeb. You're still a dweeb, but," she picked up her face to look at Kigo, face flushed, "you're the first person to really care about me. And so, Kigo, what I want to say is yes." Kigo encouraged, getting excited. Lo. "Yeah, Kmin," Kigo waved his arms towards himself. Lo. Bang. Kigo heard the sound of a gunshot and then saw the bullet wound exiting from the left side of Ririka's stomach. Energy left her body immediately and she fell towards Kigo. He let her body fall against her and saw her attacker standing behind her with a smoking gun barrel. Her assailant was a woman Soul Reaper with blonde hair holding a shotgun in one hand, the smoking gun, and an assault rifle in the other. She was wearing a red long coat and seemed to be ready to take out Kigo with the next shot. "Why you can't shoot me? I am one of Ichigo's friends as well as one of them. Don't I get my life spared?" Kigo asked. Kigo's answer was a swift blow to the side of his neck, but not from the woman in front of him. The blow was submissive and it knocked Kigo unconscious as he fell on top of Ririka's bleeding body. Still alive, but barely holding on, she saw Kigo's attacker, a female Soul Reaper with a ponytail of jade green hair, wearing a tight-fitting Shiakusho. "Yolanda, she's still breathing," the woman called to the blonde that had shot her. Ririka couldn't hear the response. She was too weak. If death were to take her now, she would let it happen. Either way, she could not hold on to her strength and her consciousness left her. High above Sakurami City, approximately a kilometer in the sky, maybe higher, Ichigo and Jinjo crossed blades. To say Ichigo was pissed wouldn't have been justice. Jinjo was barely able to contain Ichigo's strikes. The only reason Ichigo hadn't finished of Jinjo yet was because he was letting his rage get the better of him. Jinjo and Tsukishima had crossed a line and brainwashed his friends and turned Kigo against him too. If he was in a better frame of mind, he would remember Lelich's tactical training, but even without it, Jinjo was having a hard time just keeping Ichigo at bay. Finally, Jinjo decided to retreat from Ichigo and see if he could get a word in edgewise with the raging teen. "Ichigo, listen to me, we don't have to fight," Jinjo shouted. "Save it," Ichigo shouted. "Lelich explained things to me on the way here. He knows all about you, Jinjo, and he told me exactly the way things stand." Ichigo extended his blade. "I know what you want to say, how could you take his word as truth? Well then, let me tell you something. Why don't I repeat to you what he told me, and if anything he said is a non-truth you can correct him. If not, shut up, and let me continue to kick your ass like I was moments before. The only reason I'm not using my mask is because I have a lot of pent-up rage I need to work out of my system, and you're making an excellent anger vent, but that's all you're good for. If I were to use my mask, you'd be a stain on the skies of the city." Rather than antagonize Ichigo further, Jinjo kept his mouth shut, mostly because he knew Ichigo was right. "However, what are you, stupid? Tsukishima is dead, all of your friends are going to be fine. When a Fullbringer dies, all traces of their Fullbring vanish as well. Doesn't that make this whole thing seem kind of pointless?" A burst of riotsu from Ichigo was Jinjo's answer. "Pointless? I'm not just going to drop my resolve because my friends are going to be okay. You brought this on yourself, Jinjo. Like you're Ichi, I don't care that killing you isn't fruitful, but I will not forgive what you did to my friends, ever. If you pull this crap when you move on, I will find you in Rokanga and kill you again." Ichigo was dead serious about that threat, Jinjo could tell. To see the normally tranquil teen making death threats he intended to keep against a humanoid opponent was inconceivable to Jinjo. He thought Tsukishima's death would make Ichigo more reasonable, but unfortunately Lelich's training prevented that personality flaw. Even if it had, Ichigo would still be going at Jinjo relentlessly, he just wouldn't be making death threats. "Now, as I was saying, Lelich told me all about your reasons." Ichigo held up his own combat pass. "Kigo told me about the combat pass, so I don't think that's a lie. Kigo said Yukatake and the Soul Society betrayed you, so I asked Lelich about it. I can understand your pain about not being able to protect the ones you love. The same pain has been eating away at me for 6 years now for not being able to protect my mom from a hollow. Where was a Soul Reaper to defend her when hollows are the enemies of Soul Reapers? The Soul Society isn't perfect, but they're doing their best to change," Ichigo told Jinjo. "This pass, regardless of what it really means, is the power given to us to protect those we care about, and you tossed it aside and the responsibility that came with it. Did you ever bother going to the Soul Society yourself or looking for a representative? Did you know that the Soul Society can't even intervene in living world affairs?" Now it was Jinjo's turn for his resolve to be shaken. Lelich said it's a pity they didn't tell you that right from the start. Then again, it was never calculated that a bunch of terrorists could get the jump on a substitute Soul Reaper either. Ichigo put his badge away. Regardless, it doesn't matter now. Ichigo was back in tranquil mode. "Jinjo," Ichigo held his blade with both his hands, "this is punishment for your actions. Not for your transgressions against the Soul Society, but for having the audacity to turn my friends against me." He removed one hand from his sword and put it over his face. Jinjo charged to try and stop Ichigo from using his hollow mask, but Ichigo summoned the mask and appeared behind Jinjo in a fraction of a second. A big slash up Jinjo's front and down Jinjo's back, snapping the cross of scaffold in half, appeared, and the strength in Jinjo's body left him. With his upgraded power, Ichigo's mask had also changed in appearance. Now instead of going straight down his face, the lines of Ichigo's mask crossed over each other in a big black X. He removed the mask as Jinjo fell to the ground. He didn't grab the man's wrist like he had with Grimmjow. Ichigo had no respect for Jinjo, not after what he did. He let Jinjo hit the pavement, stomach first. Jinjo, using the little strength he had, looked up and saw Yuka-Take standing in front of him. Jinjo used the handle of cross of scaffold to prop himself up as best he could. Yuka-Take spoke directly to him. Natsumi was a good soldier and so were you, Jinjo, Yuka-Take told him. I'm sorry things turned out this way. I'm not. Jinjo spat blood on Yuka-Take's sock. You guys don't care about anything so long as the balance is maintained. You don't give a damn about me. And now you're rearing that kid into being the perfect little dog for your perfect little empire. Jinjo laughed darkly. I hope one day you choke on your own blood, Yuka-Take, you damn. The last of Jinjo's strength left his body, bastard. Jinjo died with his last words being used to despise the man he eternally would hate forever and ever. Ichigo came to the ground and saw Jinjo's dead body and Yuka-Take standing there. What a waste, Ichigo said stepping over to Jinjo as he returned his Bankai Tishikai form. Ichigo, about this whole mess, Yuka-Take was going to apologize for not telling him the truth about the substitute badge. Don't, Ichigo shook his head, as he sheathed Zanjutsu. I always thought what you said was weird, but I didn't want to suspect you. You didn't have to deceive me, you're smarter than me. You didn't have to tell me something so odd. The way I see it, I think you, no not just you, I think everyone wanted me to decide for myself what my decision would be. I know that you can't help me when a real-world threat looms over my head, but you won't need to. Kendra told me that I would use the power you've given me to fight back. I'm allowed to do that much, aren't I? Yuka-Take nodded. So long as you understand that your power might become restricted in favor of preserving the planet's stability. I can accept that. I can't imagine what threat could be so great, Ichigo said, and I will always be the ally of the Soul Society. I can't imagine that we would ever turn against one another. Yuka-Take smiled, that's good to hear. I see everything's all smiles and happy endings on this end, Lelouch said, walking over to the two Captain-class Soul Reapers. Lelouch, Yuka-Take addressed him. How are the others? Ichigo asked. They're coming to, Lelouch told him. Orium is already administering treatment to Urahara, Hirako, Kensei and Mashiro. What about Kigo? Ichigo asked. We'll leave that matter to you, Lelouch told Ichigo. Kigo was your friend and therefore you are permitted to do as you see fit. After all, Lelouch winked at Yuka-Take, we can't involve ourselves in living world affairs now, can we? Ah, yes, Yuka-Take knew that Lelouch was abusing a loophole. The feud between you and Kigo is a battle between friends and should be dealt with as such. However, if you choose to turn him over to us, we can do that. Ichigo nodded in understanding. I'll deal with him myself then, as long as he's alive. He is. Naomi knocked him out, Lelouch told him. I see, Ichigo said, I'm going to go see how the others are doing. He walked off. I told you we had nothing to worry about, Lelouch told Yuka-Take. You're right. But, will he still be like this in 17 years when he finds out the truth about you? After all, while we can't interfere, he might think you still could have warned him, Yuka-Take told Lelouch. He will have to come to understand. To ensure my existence, I must be prepared to make any sort of sacrifice or force some else to make a sacrifice, Lelouch said as Ichigo's image became smaller and smaller on the horizon. You should get going, Lelouch told Yuka-Take. Tell the head captain I'm staying here one more week until this mission is fully over. I feel it'll take that long before things are running smoothly again. Alright, I'll tell him, Yuka-Take said and opened a Senkaimon. Lelouch, I'm glad we have a captain like you in the Godai. You do good work. Thank you, I appreciate the praise, Lelouch said and Yuka-Take left. 1 week later. Kigo stood on the roof of the school looking out over the grey horizon. Ririko was gone. None of his friends knew of her fate, and while he still could recount all the Soul Reapers that had been around, they had gone back to Soul Society, or if they hadn't, they weren't coming to class. This left Kigo to sort out the mess. Things were starting to come back to normal. The insanity had left iPhone, Ichigo, and his friends in a little bit of disarray, but things were now back to being the way they were before Kigo had ever had a full bring. He still had it, no one had taken it from him. Kigo wondered why. As he stood on the roof, his sandwich wrapper in a brown bag next to him, the door to the roof opened and someone walked across the roof to stand next to him. It was Ichigo. I thought I might find you up here. What's the matter? You're distancing yourself from the group. Isn't that what you want? I'm not in with the group anymore. That's why I joined Jinjo, but everything I did after I made that decision is a little bit of a blur, Kigo told Ichigo. It was the result of Tsukishima's fullbring, not that Ichigo had any way of knowing that. Kigo sighed and continued to look over the horizon. I thought I had finally found the one, you know. To be stolen from me, will I be able to go on? I don't know, but, Ichigo dangled Jinjo's blood-stained cross necklace in front of Kigo, we're here to help you if you need us. Kigo let the necklace fall into his hands. They let you have this. I snatched it when no one was looking. It's not like he needs it. I just thought you'd like a memento, since I couldn't find Ririka's body anywhere, Ichigo told him. Kigo put Jinjo's necklace on and clenched it. They must have been good friends to you, Kigo. I'm sorry, Ichigo apologized. You're not the one who needs to apologize, Kigo told him, what I did was dumb. I tried to do everything myself. I shouldn't have disobeyed Kendra-san by joining up with Jinjo and the others, Kigo looked at Ichigo, I should have gone straight to you. Kigo looked up at his friend. From now on, to make up for what I did, now that I have the ability to fight, if there's ever a crazy adventure you get into, I want to be there with you. Let me atone for my actions. Kigo extended a hand to Ichigo. All right, atonement it is, Ichigo told him. Ordinarily Kigo would jump for joy, but the atmosphere was too dreary for that, so he simply said, I'm going to go finish eating with everyone else. You coming? I'll be there in a few, got a few things on my mind, Ichigo waved. Kigo understood and headed for the door. He took one last look over towards the horizon. Ririka. He thought of the girl he loved and then headed down into the school building. On the roof, Ichigo looked around the corner of the building that was a blind spot to his, and formerly Kigo's, position. I know you're there, Kendra. The Onmitsukido lieutenant came out of hiding wearing her Shiakusho. So you decided to let him make up for his actions by atoning for them. Ichigo nodded, I'm not a cold-hearted person. Besides, he's still my friend. I think I already did enough when I put my blade to his throat. Ichigo looked forward over the horizon, poor guy had to have been wetting his pants. I'm sorry for using Kigo like I did. You must hate me for using your friend like that, Kendra said with a straight face. Ichigo rubbed his head, why would I hate you? You asked him to help you out. It's not your fault he sympathized with Jinjo's group. Kigo made that decision all on his own. Speaking of decisions, I hear you're fully embracing your role as deputy to the Soul Society, Kendra said. Ichigo nodded and looked up at the sky, the sun was trying to come out. Well, good luck, and know that we've all got your back when we can, Kendra then left the roof. Elsewhere. At an airport, Ririka was planning to board a plane and take a flight out up north to the EU into good old Mother Russia. Her family had moved to Japan from Russia 4 generations ago, and so Ririka was going to live in her roots. She was all dressed up in a coyote fur coat waiting for her flight. She had survived the encounter with the Onmitsukido, but it had come with a price. During the last week, the real reason Lelich stayed behind, her full bring had been removed from her, forcibly, by the Soul Society. Since she had survived and Lelich was willing to let her live, and full bring was easily removed through science, it was agreed that Ririka could be let go now that she had no longer had any spiritual power. Ririka wanted to stay, but decided it was best if she didn't. She wanted to get away from the pain of losing all of her friends and from the pain that she was now a normal girl. She couldn't go back to Kigo, not until she learned a way to restore her spiritual power and get a new power. She'd never be able to confront him if she wasn't able to fight. She and Kigo belonged to 2 different worlds now. She couldn't tie him down to her as just a normal girl. That was her decision and she was sticking to it. Now boarding flight 404A. That was Ririka's flight. She handed her ticket over and entered into the plane. After takeoff she looked out over the horizon. "Goodbye Kigo, thank you for caring about me so much, but, please forget about me. You and I were never meant to be, but, if you still want to be a dweeb enough to wait for me, I will return. I will return and we can be happy together, but don't." The medicine Ryrika had taken to ease the pain caused by the wound in her stomach, a healing wound, but a wound nonetheless, was staring to take effect and making her drowsy. "Wait up on me," Ryrika mumbled and fell asleep as the plane flew towards Russia. She would be lonely in Russia, but she would survive. She knew she was a fighter. She could handle it. Goodbye Kigo. My love. End of chapter 119. Chapter 120, Godi vs Cage Rosa, Turnabout Reggae. Third person POV. How do I get myself wrapped up into these situations? Ranjika thought to herself as she stood at the prosecutor's bench in the Central 46. She was dripping with sweat, teeth clenched in frustration, fist squeezed and shaking on the desk. Her opponent, 5th seed of Squad 6 Mitaru Rosu, the only man willing to take defense, stood across from her. Rosu had bowl-shaped, flat black hair except for a bitch curl that hung off to the right side of his hair in the shape of a lightning bolt. On trial was a seated officer in the 12th Division, Inaba Cage Rosa. Cage Rosa was being charged with high treason. However, Ranjika was being pressured because her opponent was trying to prove that Cage Rosa had no ill intent to use his newest creation, Reggae. The defense would get him a reduced sentence of possession of illegal technologies, a low-class felony that would get him no more than 50 years, while the latter could put Cage Rosa away until he rotted, possibly public execution. It is true that the defendant could use these machines for ill purposes, but does the prosecution have any evidence to support their claims? I think the sweat dripping down Matsumoto Fukutaiko's forehead is proof of that, Rosu had stated. Ranjika didn't know what to do. She had a limited amount of time to think, so all she could do was rewind her brain, quickly to try and find the answer of what to do and what had happened over the past couple of days. 5 days ago. 22:30. 10th Division. A young girl with pine green hair, narrow frame, and amethyst eyes, panted as she made a dash for the Senkaimon. She would run and never be found. That was her intention. To the hell with the Soul Society, she had though, if they wouldn't help her with her predicament she wouldn't spend any more time around the area. Unfortunately for the girl her escape wasn't going to come to fruition, for Shiba Kyokaku, 5th seed of Squad 10, was making a round through the squad and at this very moment just so happened to see this girl run by as she stood up on the balcony and saw the girl run from underneath the building. The angle made it so that the girl could not see Kyokaku, but Kyokaku could see her. Quickly the 5th seed called for a Hell Butterfly. "Captain, we've got a code 85 down in Sector S, engaging the target, requesting your presence sir." Kyokaku let the Hell Butterfly go off and sprang to action. She leapt from the balcony and down towards the girl just before she reached the Senkaimon. "Aeon, hold it." Kyokaku grabbed the girl's wrist and pulled it back. The girl continued to struggle, but Kyokaku's grip was firm. "Hey, calm down, I'm not going to hurt you, but you were about to make a med dash for the Senkaimon and that's grounds for desertion. Quit struggling. Whatever it is you're trying to do can be talked over with the captain." "Let me go," the girl said passively, "just let me go." "Sorry, no can do." Kyokaku pulled the struggling girl away from the Senkaimon towards the barracks walls. "You want to ruin your career, that's fine, but I've already experienced prison once, I am not going back." "Kyokaku, what's going on?" It wasn't Lelich, but Ranjika reporting in. "Ranjiku." Kyokaku turned her head. "Where's the captain?" "About to head to the R&D department to work on a project, I got past the responsibility. He said he would call for the Onmitsukido on the way over." "Sounds like he made a good call considering you've got a female deserter," Ranjika stated. "Just let me go. I can't stay here." "Let me go," the girl struggled, continuing to use a suppressed, monotone voice. "What did I say?" Kyokaku grunted, wrapping her arms around the girl and binding her. "I can't let you do that. Quit struggling." As Kyokaku turned to face Ranjiku, the blonde blinked and seemed to recognize the struggling girl trying to escape Kyokaku's grip. "Hey, wait, I recognize her," Ranjiku said. "You recognize her?" Kyokaku asked. Kyujo, Nozomi right? Rangiku asked holding up a finger. The girl continued to struggle, not responding. Sounds like she's not going to be cooperative, Kyokaku said, trying to hold Nozomi in place. Just tell me, what's the alarm here? Danger level? Should I use Kido? If it's you, you should be fine, Nozomi's a 7th seat. You're a capable senior officer. Besides, I'm here too, Rangiku said and then tried to appeal to Nozomi by leaning forward and talking in a friendly manner. Come on Nozomi, let's talk this out. Things'll be fine if you just talk to your Fukotaiko. Let me go, Nozomi continued to struggle. She's starting to sound like a broken record, Kyokaku mulled over. It was getting on her nerves. Thankfully Kendra showed up moments later. She was alone. No squad mates. Kyokaku asked with a sneer. It's a code 85 and there are 2 vice captains here including myself. Besides this is my favorite part of the job, Kendra said holding up her right hand, yanking on the cloth of her glove with her left. She was smirking behind her face mask. Hand her over, Kendra requested. Kyokaku obliged and Kendra wrestled Nozomi's hands behind her back and used her Ryotsu to keep Nozomi from moving. She then restrained Nozomi using Bakudo 63, Seija Sabaku and then proceeded to give Nozomi a whole spiel Lelich had added into the court system. You've got the right to remain silent. If you give up that right anything you say can be used in the court against you. You will be assigned a proper defense from the 6th or 10th division. Do you understand what I am saying to you? Yes, Nozomi said submissively. Good, let's go. Kendra pushed forward on Nozomi so that she hunched over. Which one of you wants to prosecute? I suppose I'll have to since Kyokaku's an eyewitness, Rangiku stated. Good, Kendra said. Kyokaku, you come too so we can legalize your eyewitness testimony. No problem, Kyokaku replied. The trio dragged Nozomi to Yasui's office. The man happened to be polishing his Zanpakuto at the time. After the Muramasa incident, Yasui intended to take good care of his weapon and that meant making sure it always had a streak-free shine. Ladies, what can I do for you? Yasui asked when the 3 women entered his office with a bound Nozomi as he put his sword back in its sheath and leaned the handle up against his desk. Code 85, attempted desertion, Kendra stated. You don't even know I was trying to leave, Nozomi said rudely. You were making a beeline for the Senkaimon at top speed, Kyokaku said. If that's not attempted desertion then what is it? Nozomi went back to being silent. Yasui sighed, this is never any fun. Hand her to me and I'll put her in a holding cell, go speak with Yolanda and let's get this show on the road. No problem, Kendra said and passed the custody of the accused. Rangiku and Kyokaku followed her into Yolanda's office. So what's all the commotion for? Yolanda asked. A code 85, Kendra replied. And? What do you have for me? Yolanda asked leaning forward and interlocking her fingers. Just eyewitness testimony, Kendra placed her hand on Kyokaku's shoulder. I see, let's hear it then, Yolanda said. Kyokaku lit up her pipe and then gave her testimony as she spread out her arms as if she was trying to get the 4th seat to envision the scene. So there I was, being me, and then I saw this chick run out from underneath me. She was heading right towards the Senkaimon at top speed. I sent out a hell butterfly to my captain labeling what I believed as a code 85 and then I leapt from my perch and grabbed her by the arm and held her until Rangiku came to survey the situation, who informed me that Lelich had sent her to survey the situation. I'll wordplay with you later to make that sound more authentic, but for now it's good, Yolanda said as she kept her fingers interlocked while pointing her index fingers at Kyokaku. Kendra, you'll have to have Patrol Corps go through the accused's quarters, see if we can find motivation to make this more convincing. Kyokaku's testimony is enough, but in the hands of a skilled attorney you'll be in hot water. Matsumoto Fukotaiko. Yolanda opened a drawer and began digging for a warrant sheet. Yes, I'm well aware of that, Rangiku responded. Suddenly the door slid open. It was a member of the Onmitsukido under Kendra's jurisdiction. Fukotaiko, Samakura-sama has requested your presence at interrogation. Kendra sighed, this is the part of the job I don't like. She had a bad feeling this open/shut case was about to become much more complicated. And it was. I'll come too, Yolanda said, if she's going to speak, it's best I'm there for developments. Kendra nodded. All four women left the office and headed for the interrogation room. Everyone stood around, except for Kyokaka, who was asked not to listen in for protocol's sake. Rangiku and Yolanda stood outside while Nozomi sat inside crying into her hands. Kendra wasn't interrogating her, rather she was currently doing that to Yasuie. What did you do? Kendra exasperated, arms spread wide. Nothing, I swear, Yasuie defended, holding up his hands in defense. I started bringing her to the precinct and all of a sudden she starts breaking into tears, asking if she could be talked to and that she wanted to come clean. No threats, no intimidation, Fukutaiko, I swear on my rank. If there was one thing Kendra hated seeing, it was a potentially fragile, uncooperative defendant breaking into tears. For a Code 85, Nozomi could get 20 years in the slammer. Since Soul Reapers lived longer, the penalties were higher than real-world sentences. On top of that, the prisons were co-ed, so prison rape was a lot worse than in the real world. Of course, at least in prison Yasuie could deal out retribution as much as he wanted, being warden and all. One threat Kendra and Yasuie loved to make on uncooperative witnesses and defendants was the prison rape threat. It went a little something like this. From Kendra, "Oh yeah, being uncooperative is a great idea," she would say as she sat on the table kicking her legs, back to the interrogated individual, one hand on the desk, her other arm across her lap, speaking sardonically, "We've got more than enough evidence to choke a Jillian on you. And you can be sure we can send you right to the back where there's this big guy named Kigoga that no one else wants to mess with." From Yasuie, Yasuie would keep his eyes focused on the witness or actor. "Look, you can help us or I can tip off the biggest nastiest convicts as to who the fresh meat, and I won't lift a finger to help you because you're not helping me now." As Yasuie had said though, no such tactics had been used. Nozomi completely cracked down of her own accord. Kendra sat down at the metal table, pulled her chair closer and talked to Nozomi in a calm voice. "Okay, just calm down, Kyojo-san, what's wrong?" Nozomi just continued to cry. "If you're afraid of something, tell us what it is." "We're knights of justice," Yasuie said, leaning up against the wall, and then scratched his cheek, though maybe samurai would be more accurate. "Unless of course you're afraid of going to prison," Kendra said, leaning back, "but even if you plead guilty, you're still up a creek with no paddle. You've got no one to blame, but yourself." "That's not it," Nozomi wiped her eye. I am scared of," she buried her hands in her face, "no, I can't talk about it. He'll find me, he'll kill me, he'll. Tell us," Kendra stressed, leaning forward, "if there's some fishy business going on, that's what we're here for. You should have come here instead of trying to run away." "But I can't do it," Nozomi removed her hands, "you're all in danger, every last one of you. He'll kill us all, and all because you caught me. Once the paperwork gets filled out, it's all over. We're done for." "No report has been filled out yet, Kyojo-san. If there's something you want kept secret, tell us please," Kendra stated. "This should really be talked over with her attorney present," Yasuie stated. "We haven't even found one yet and she hasn't asked." "We're clear," Kendra looked at her partner. "I need a piece of paper and a utensil," Nozomi requested. "Also, let me see your left hands." "Are what?" Kendra asked flatly. "I'll tell you anything you want if you give me what I requested," Nozomi insisted. Yasuie shrugged with a smile, "Give the lady what she wants." Kendra gave her the implements. Her writing utensil was a thick calligraphy brush. The sharp points of pencils and pens could be lethal weapons in the wrong hands. The Onmitsukido did not take such chances. She got the objects from Yolanda and made sure to check her and Rangiku's left hands for anything suspicious. Whatever it was that had Nozomi paranoid, Kendra wanted to make sure she wasn't going to see it on her friends. Nozomi trusted Kendra and Yasuie after both rolled up their left sleeves and began writing a name on the parchment she had been given. "His name is Inaba Kage-Rosa. He's the 7th seat of Squad 12. "Okay, and what's he got to do with this?" Yasuie asked. "He's plotting to destroy the Soul Society, plotting to replace all of the high-level Soul Reapers with Regai." Nozomi held up her left hand. "They all have these armbands on their left arms." "I see, and what's a Regai exactly?" Kendra asked. Nozomi explained the concept to Yasui and Kendra. Regai were basically the soul version of Jigai and Jikungan. It's what would happen if a Jikungan or mod soul was dropped down the gullet of an actual Soul Reaper or Rukonga civilian. Go on, Kendra said. I cannot say more. I dare not say more. Nozomi was really freaked. You have to arrest him before things get out of control. I'll notify the captain and we'll go and do a rundown of all the senior officers. You go and arrest this Cage Rosa fellow, Yasui said. Kendra nodded and began to head out. Rangiku, keep our guest company would you? Rangiku nodded in compliance. Yolanda, she said to the fourth seat, start filling out paperwork, but don't send any of it through official channels. If you see me or hear anything from me, the password is Archangel. Understood, Fukutaiko. Yolanda saluted. Kendra took off by herself. This arrest would require subtlety, so she would have to do it alone. Nozomi could be sending them on a wild goose chase, but things would be fine as long as Rangiku was with Nozomi. As she dashed along a rooftop towards Division 12, Naomi began tagging along. Oni-sama, what's going on? Naomi, this is really not a good time. I need to make an arrest and I need to do it alone, Kendra stated sternly. But I can help. I'm your sidekick. I'm your best friend. You're Naomi. Kendra shouted. Yes. I'm sorry, but I have to do this alone. She stopped short. Let me see your left arm. What? Naomi asked, skidding to a halt as well. Let me see your left arm, Kendra repeated forcefully. Okay, Naomi said and rolled up her sleeve to her shoulder. Kendra examined it from all sides. Kendra let out a breath of relief. Go back to the division and go to the interrogation room. Stand guard at the door. We have a Code 85 who's given us a wild story, but we can't take any chances that it's false. She seems spooked, Naomi, Kendra stated. I'll do anything you ask me to, Oni-sama. Naomi took off. Kendra continued to make her way to the R&D department and did so silently and extremely quietly. She tried to recall from memory the kanji Nozomi had written down and looked for it on the barracks doors. Soon she found the exact door she was looking for. She stood alongside the door and gently tested the door to see if it was locked. It was. Kendra counted to herself and let her heart rate get down before spinning towards the door and kicking it wide open. On Mitsukido. Hands where I can see them. She brandished her Zanpakuto. Inaba Cage Rosa was standing with his back to Kendra as she stood in front of the door. He slowly turned around and looked at her with his shiny bifocals and held his cane as he looked at her. Just you, Otamaka Fukutaiko? How distasteful. I take it you were expecting me, Kendra responded. I did, but certainly not this quick. I haven't even had the time to turn on my first creation yet. I assure you, though, my work is within the ethical boundary of the new department testament, Cage Rosa stated. Tell it to the jury, Inaba-san, I'm taking you in, Kendra stated. I'm afraid I can't let you do that, Otamaka Fukutaiko. It pains me to do this, but I'm going to have to destroy all traces that you were ever here. He prepared to release his Zanpakuto. Go mad, Rai. Ha. Could. Kendra soared through the air and planted her foot right in Cage Rosa's face, before spinning and kicking his cheek, sending him spiraling towards the wall. She dropped to the ground. Kill from the shadows, Akuma Ansatsu. With dagger in hand, Kendra rose up and cut Cage Rosa once, with the energy released off of her slash, to destabilize him, and then slid along the ground and grabbed his cane and tossed it halfway across the room. She then spun and delivered a high kick to his chin and knocked him into the air. She followed through by leaping into the air, kicked him twice, once with each leg, cut him with her dagger again, and then drove a hard overhead kick into his spinal cord and sent him slamming into the ground. Cage Rosa was ultimately beaten down. It was days like this that Kendra was thankful for a lack of rules for violence used against a suspect, but then again what Cage Rosa had said up to that point, in her mind, justified her actions. She picked up the beaten, bruised, and bleeding Cage Rosa up off the ground and bound his hands behind his back. Kendra smirked from behind her face mask as she cast Kido to bind him. I love my job. Present day. After that, Cage Rosa had been brought in for a little chat. His inactive Regeis had been found and his entire collection was confiscated. The whole affair had superseded Nozomi's case who, in return for pleading guilty on attempted desertion and her help with Cage Rosa, if he was convicted, brought her sentence down to 2 years. Kendra's testimony had already been submitted and Rosu had questioned her and asked her if there was a chance Nozomi was making it all up, not even giving Kendra a chance to explain her good faith on the situation. Things looked bleak. Rosa was going to get Cage Rosa off the hook and Ranjika couldn't stand it. She had been there with Nozomi. The girl was scared out of her wits. Kendra had advised against bringing Nozomi to the stand since Kendra was afraid Nozomi might have been coerced by Cage Rosa in the last few days. She also wasn't part of the list of witnesses the prosecution had prepared for. Kendra had testified and Cage Rosa was corroborating his story with his attorney and, despite the evidence, it didn't look good. Ranjika was cornered. She needed to come out of this. Turn the case around, somehow. However, she had thought over the situation and she only had one idea of how to get out of this. It's a risk, but I have to take it. Sorry Kendra, but I'm doomed anyway. I have to take this risk. If the prosecution is not going to respond then this court will conv. Objection. Ranjika shouted, thrusting her pointer finger out into the middle of the courtroom. I hate it when they do that, the judge thought to himself. Your Honor, the prosecution requests a witness be brought to trial, Ranjika requested. A witness? Rosu asked. This is my last witness, Ranjika stated. Your Honor, the prosecution would like to bring Kyujo Nozomi to the stand. Rosu's head picked up. Ranjika flipped her hair and smiled. I see you have an idea as to my angle, Mitaru-san. Do you object? Rosu cleared his throat. The defense has no objection to the presentation of Kyujo-san as a last-minute witness. Very well, please have the convicted Kyujo Nozomi brought to this courtroom immediately, the judge requested. 10 minutes later. Nozomi was escorted to the witness stand. She swore upon the code of honor and aversion of the damnation of her reincarnation that she would tell the truth and Ranjika began to interrogate her. Nozomi, is it true that you broke down crying before telling Otomaka Fukotaiko and Samakura Yasui about the defendant? Why yes, that's true, Nozomi stated. Is it also true that you stopped short of telling them the whole story that, in your own words, Ranjika pulled out a sheet of paper, I cannot say more. I dare not say more. Why yes, that's true, Nozomi was nervous. What did you stop for? Ranjika asked. Objection, Your Honor, relevance. Rosu asked. Your Honor, this witness knows something about Cage Rosa that she failed to tell us that night. Ranjika looked up at the judge. Whatever it is, I'd like for the court to hear it. She tightened her gaze at Nozomi, all of it. One of two things will happen now. Either she'll come clean or Cage Rosa will break down to make her shut up. Ranjika, you're a genius. She patted herself on the back mentally. What do you want me to say exactly? Nozomi asked, still nervous. Would you please tell the court what you didn't tell Otomaka Fukotaiko and Samakura Yasui about the defendant the night you were arrested for desertion? Would you please tell them everything? Ranjika asked. Don't you say a damn thing, Nozomi. Cage Rosa shouted from his bench. Think of the greater good. We can escape. Don't say it. You can't tell them. Mitaru-san, please control your client. The judge requested. Yes, Your Honor, sorry, Your Honor. Rosu apologized and attempted to do so while Ranjika talked to Nozomi. Nozomi, may I remind you that you are under oath. Perjury will raise your 2-year sentence to 32 years, Ranjika told her. You know our captain, you know what his motto is, to do justice and punish the unjust. Where is justice, Nozomi? Nozomi! Cage Rosa shouted. Nozomi, Ranjika called her name calmly. Kyujo-san, the judge spoke to her. Nozomi! Nozomi! Kyujo-san! The calling of Nozomi's name continued repetitively until she couldn't take it anymore. Stoop 3 Yaini. She shouted. She began panting. She bent over the witness stand. I will do the right thing. Nozomi, you can't. You can't do this. Cage Rosa protested. Inaba, Cage Rosa, if you make one more outburst you will be in contempt of this court, now behave. The judge scolded him. Just tell us what you know, Nozomi, Rangiku stated. Nozomi told it all. She stared with her maker and continued into Project Spearhead. The breakdown, the split, the plan, the ambition, she told it all. Rosa's jaw dropped open hearing it all, unable to believe such a wild tale. Your Honor, a 15-minute recess to double-check these facts. Rangiku requested. Request approved, the judge banged the gavel. The results were in Rangiku's favor. It can't be, the Empire, the plan, I can't fail. Nuu. Kage Rosa crawled into a ball on the ground. Midori-san, please remove your client from the court. The judge told him. Yes sir, Midori stated. The jury was in agreement. There could be no doubt of Kage Rosa's guilt now. He was sentenced to execution and went straight to hell. Upon his death, Kage Rosa fell screaming into its pits and landed, but got up and shouted towards the red sky. You haven't heard the last of me. Kage Rosa shouted to the sky as he stood about in hell's 8th circle. Kage Rosa Inaba will return. The Soul Society will crumble. I will destroy every last one of you. You want to destroy the Soul Society, you say? A calm, smooth voice said from behind Kage Rosa. Kage Rosa turned around and came face to face with the last man he wanted to see in hell. Sinner or no, even Kage Rosa knew he was fucked over when he saw the man that was behind him. His run-in was a man with slicked back brown hair, a white uniform and a Zanpakuto sheathed at his side. The Zanpakuto had a green handle and a hexagonal guard. No, not you. Kage Rosa hobbled away backwards in shock and fell on his ass, gaping and trembling at what he believed to be far worse than the Angel of Death. He was staring at the man who was feared as being the Demon Soul Reaper of the Soul Society, the man who was struck down before he could cause trouble, Soul Society's greatest threat besides a Tremere Talbumasuk. Aizen, SS Sosuke. Aizen whipped out his Zanpakuto and held it out at his side, turning the blade so that the flat end pointed at the ground. I'm sorry to tell you, but I will not allow anyone to plan to destroy the Soul Society. Control I can admire, destruction I cannot. Enjoy suffering in the lowest pits of hell for eternity, Kage Rosa Inaba. GG go mad, Reikyu. Aizen moved too fast for Kage Rosa and sliced him in half from the center of the heart up, spinal cord, intestines, everything flowed out. There was so much blood. Aizen shook the blood off of his sword and put it away. There is only one man who will have his revenge on the Soul Society, and that is me, Aizen responded. He then stuck his hands in his pockets and continued off. He walked up a slanted ridge of brimstone and stared at a tall mountain that seemed to reach up towards the top of hell. It had a dark green smoke ring around it and was dark black in color. It was still very far away from Aizen's position as he could crush the whole thing in his fingers. Soon though, I will climb that mountain and I will do battle with you, Jinin Garita. To be continued. Check the description for the links to the author.